All right, this meeting of the City of Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole will come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Here.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Jacobson?
Here.
Mr. Madigan?
Here.
Ms. Marlin?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe?
Here.
Mayor Pressing?
Here.
Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, are there any staff reports? Mr. Gray?
Thank you. I want to let you and the public know that later this week and for the next several weeks, every property owner in the city of Urbana will be receiving a letter regarding the new stormwater utility fee. The fee amount for that particular property will be so printed. This letter is not a bill, but it's information to provide residents about what is the stormwater utility fee and understanding your bill. We'll talk a little bit about what incentives and credits are. There will be 3 meetings that we'll be holding, public meetings, to answer all questions about incentives and credits for those who wish to pursue them. There is a unique customer service phone number in this letter to be used, whereby we'll be addressing all the calls that may come in with questions on their billing or about incentives or credits or how did the dollar amount come about. The amount for a residential property will be $4.94 per month, or which is less than $60 a year. That will be the fee for residential properties. All other properties, though, typically will be a multiplication of that number depending on what the amount of impervious area is on the particular property. There is online already a frequently asked question information that's carefully worded and listed out. So if you have some questions already, or if you're fielding questions, council members, that's a good resource to use. Again, we'll have ample staff available to timely respond to calls, questions that do come into our attention. So I wanted to give everybody that heads up that starting later this week, there'll be about 9,000 some odd letters going out to all the various property owners in Urbana. That's it.
Any other staff reports? Mr. Carino. Oh, Madam Mayor?
Oh, he can go first.
All right.
Go ahead.
Good evening. Everyone should have received a copy of the Economic Development Report, which is now included in your packet. Just to highlight a few items, there was a ribbon cutting held for the new State Farm agency at Millhouse Plaza at 408 North Race Street. Activity continues in downtown with a soft opening of CoLab at 206 West Main Street. Also related to new startup funding for businesses in downtown, there's been a lot of activity with the Butcher, Pizza M, Flying Machine Coffee, and Langston Alston's mural. Those all are participating in either an Indiegogo fundraising campaign or a Kickstarter fundraising campaign, so interesting use of crowdsourced funding. Also, the new Rulers grocery store at Southgate Shopping Mall is open, and I believe they have an item before you later on the agenda. The UBA also held a ribbon cutting at El Oasis, a new ice cream and snack shop at 510 North Cunningham. Related to marketing efforts, Natalie Kenny Marquez and folks here at the city are gearing up to welcome students back. The city participated in the Urbana School District 116 registration, also preparing to distribute marketing information to incoming students at University of Illinois. Related to public art, there were 29 submissions to the 2013-14 Murals on Glass project. The city worked with a selection panel including citizens, the UBA Public Art Commission members, and we're finalizing those selections, and those will be going up in just a couple of months. And then finally, some good news and some sad news. Our Christina McClelland, our Public Arts Coordinator, was recently named to the 2013 Central Illinois Business Magazine's 40 Under 40, but she has also accepted a new position with the City and County of Denver, Colorado. So congratulations to Christina, and she will be missed. And that's all I have. I'd be happy to try to answer questions.
Oh, he has a question.
Eric?
So I thought maybe it would be appropriate to also mention that there's a, looks like a very ambitious Folk and Roots Festival at the Landmark Hotel this coming weekend. So there's information about that on the web. And see somebody who might be performing there who's nodding her head saying, yes, 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 you all come. Saturday and Sunday. So I think it's going to be a great event, and I think a good thing for downtown Urbana and the whole city. So I hope that folks will support that.
Mayor Pressing.
Yeah, I wanted to report, we've had a number of innovations in Urbana in response to the complaints from residents in southeast Urbana on poorly maintained property. We did rental registration, and we're able to hire another building inspector. And also we did the aggravated nuisance ordinance, which has given the police department more power. And I think we've had a huge impact on the crime rates in that area. We still want to work more. And I think we need another building inspector, and we'll be looking at whether we should be raising the rental registration fees and the fine amounts. If we want to raise the fine amounts, we'd have to change the building code adopting ordinance. But in terms of the issues that Esther Pat raised, for tenant complaints, we could shorten the time when the landlord is asked to respond and fix the problem. We can do that without changing the ordinance. We started a ticket system and this year, and I think we've been pretty successful on that, but we do need more staff. We have a few landlords that are creating a lot of problems, and so we need to deal with them. So we are working on this, and we'll bring you the details as they get worked out and ask for input.
All right, thank you. Charlie?
I have a question for Mayor.
Sure.
Mayor Pressing, will you also be looking at the language? You know, right now it says maybe a fine. It'd probably be a lot better if the ordinance is worded shall be a fine.
Sure. I mean, we want input on this, how to change it, but I think we do need to stiffen the fines and give people a reasonable amount of time, but not allow extensions unless there's really extenuating circumstances that can't be avoided, like a tornado or something.
Any other questions?
I was
Charlie?
going to provide a staff report myself. If I could get Jeff Yockey up here with
All right.
me.
Charlie Smythe.
As many of you know, I wear another hat as working with Champaign County Bikes. This year, Champaign County Bikes did a 6-month revision of its Champaign-Urbana Savoy bike guide and map, and it has expanded substantially. So I'd like to remind you that all 3 city governments and the university, all the park districts, the MTD, all contributed to the production and sponsorship of this map. To speak to some of the individual issues on it, I'll introduce Jeff Yockey, who is president of Champaign County Bikes.
Yeah, and I also live at 304 West Washington. I want to thank you so much for this. Reflected in the title is the word guide. The non-map component of this is so beefed up. Bike laws, there's over 40 different interactions that are illustrated graphically between bicyclists and motorists and buses, different encounters you will have at intersections and left turn lanes, for example, that we're calling this a guide. And there's so much content here that I think we could have a great time for an hour with students in a driver's ed class. We could keep the Rotary clubs entertained with the stuff that they're interested in. And so this is a big educational piece, and it's already being utilized actually by the law enforcement agencies in our community to pull out elements of this map, reformat them for an educational push that will happen this fall before the enhanced bike law enforcement campaign will happen a little later. And we're very excited about the cooperation we've had with the law enforcement in our communities and this bicycle enforcement. That's very important. We want to create a culture where bicyclists ride in a way that's predictable and appropriate, and that motorists can benefit by that, and that we have just a better interaction. The U of I has enough of these maps to give one to all the incoming students, and we're set to update this map on an annual basis and publish the revisions each of the next couple years. So I want to thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman.
Just to add something to this, if anybody in the public is interested, there are copies of the map on the shelf on your way out on the right and at the door on the shelves to the left on exit. Questions?
Madam Mayor.
I wanted to ask, on the rules of the road for motorists, is there any information in that about bicyclists?
Yeah, much of this information regards how bicyclists and motorists interact as they share the road together. So yes, it talks about the motorists needing to give bicyclists a certain amount of passing space, how to ride together. So we've
That's
actually
in the rules of the road that the state publishes?
Yeah.
Or is it just in your publication?
No, it's in the rules of the road of the state, and in fact, all the rules of the road pertaining to bicycles are summarized in the
Okay,
in
great.
the rightmost panel of the back.
Okay.
Of the
Carol.
I just wanted to see if the bicycle maps will be provided to the high schools and middle schools. I know the public health district has the Bike to Work project for the students, and they would benefit from having these as well.
The CU Public Health District is a new sponsor this edition around. We are trying to get back into driver's ed classes. Safe Routes to School is another sponsor. They have been the primary contact with the schools. So whatever mechanisms they work out, we can provide the maps and get them out of Jeff's basement.
Eric.
So I've been quickly going to your website to see if there's a readily readable and legible version of this on the site.
It is in the maps section.
Right. I have.
And the PDFs for the back and front are downloadable to your smartphone.
Aha.
And I actually pull them up and refer to them from mine. They're
Okay.
they're PDF files, so as long as you have some kind of Adobe Reader on your smartphone, you can look at the files.
You might look a little bit at the resolution. I actually found it while we were talking, and I've zoomed it up, but it's a little coarse.
Keep zooming.
Okay. Okay.
Just don't do it while you're biking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still pretty
I'll
fuzzy.
have to
So
look.
I'll show you my screen when you.
Picking on the IT guy there. Nice.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other staff reports? Okay, time for public input.
Mr. Madigan, you need to approve the minutes.
I guess we skipped that part. All right. Approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of July 8th, 2013?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Diane. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. Okay, on to public input. Bishop King James Underwood and Reverend Dr. Evelyn B. Underwood do not choose to address the committee, but ask that their position be entered into the record as follows. We are concerned about Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems. John Dodson, no other information?
I'm here on the liquor license.
Okay, very good. Jeff Yaki?
Yeah, I was just going to make some comments and thank you for the map, so that's that first comment.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Teresa Michelson, regarding building code enforcement. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, I'm Teresa Michelson. I live at 2013 Silver Court West in Urbana. Pull some pictures up here for you. I think. Here we go. 3 apartment buildings on Silver Street owned by Paul Zaruki have been roped off since February 24th of this year. That's almost 6 months. Since I live at the west end of Silver Street and they are on the east, which lets out onto Philo Road, I drive by them regularly. Their condition is an eyesore in the neighborhood. They present a serious safety hazard, especially for children in the neighborhood. I'm interested in the city's timeline for dealing with these properties. I'm also here to ask how we can prevent this kind of ongoing deterioration of property from happening elsewhere. We have a building code enforcement ordinance that has the tools to do so. It needs to be applied consistently by issuing tickets to landlords who show themselves habitually resistant to working with the city to remediate problems with their properties. Tickets are issued and fines are imposed if those tickets are not paid. I absolutely agree with Esther Patt that we need to increase the ticket penalty to get the attention of such landlords. Letting buildings like this slowly deteriorate is detrimental to renters, to homeowners in the area, to property values, and to the city tax base. Thank you.
Nancy Uckman, regarding building code violations.
I'm Nancy Gutman, living at 208 Pell Circle in Urbana. I just want to thank the city code inspectors for now condemning 22 units on Colorado Avenue. There are 11 units at 1003 Colorado now condemned, and another 11 units at 905 Colorado condemned today. So those are now vacant. That's 22. And thank you for condemning the 36 apartments on Silver Street. That takes a total of, 58 units out of commission. I did talk to several of the tenants along Silver Street today. None of them wanted to attend the meeting. However, I do have a message from a tenant named Paul who lives at 1305 Silver, apartment 6, and he said that he is still very much bothered by roaches. His apartment is infested, and that his air conditioning unit does not work properly, and it is supplied by the landlord. And so thank you for your efforts, and I hope we can enforce the building codes. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah McDougall, regarding code enforcement.
I'm Sarah McDougall. I live at 1305 Scoville Street. I'm a landlord in a small way, having renting one half of my apartment, my building. just by the way, I didn't realize there was a consideration of raising the landlord registration fee, but if I have to pay as much as the large owners would, I would feel that this was unfair, and I would be subsidizing them and the necessity of inspecting them. However, and I do think that enforcing the building code is very important for maintaining the neighborhoods and maintaining the happiness of residents like me and tenants like my downstairs neighbors. And that's my opinion.
Ms. McDougal?
Question? Charlie?
Yeah. So just to clarify that a little bit, would you favor a tier system then for, say, a small property owner versus a large property owner? Something that reflected, somebody who owns just a few units versus somebody who makes it a regular full-blown business?
Yes, I think that would be fair. Perhaps if you divide it along the lines of what is the regulation that governs Section 8? If you live in the apartment, if you live in the building and it's only 4 units, you don't have to open it to Section 8.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm wrong. But yes, I think small.
Okay, so I'll see what staff thinks about that. Thank you.
Alice Novak, regarding ZTA local landmark failure.
Good evening. I'm Alice Novak. I live at 601 West Delaware Avenue, and I am chair of the Urbana Historic Preservation since its creation 15 years ago. Because I was an instructor of UP 420, Planning for Historic Preservation, the class in which Brianna Kraft prepared the local landmark application for the Zeta Tau Alpha sorority house, I had a conflict of interest in this case. Now that the case has come to an unfortunate conclusion, I'm free to speak. I did attend all the council meetings until the last council meeting where the decision was made on August 5th, but I did even watch that via live stream, unfortunately, while I was on vacation. Much seems to have been made that a student prepared and submitted the local landmark application, but our community has benefited substantially from student work for many, many years, in fact, over 100 years. In the realm of historic preservation, one of 3 historic districts in Urbana, Buena Vista Court, were done by students, and 7 of 15 local landmarks were prepared and presented by students. A second historic district for the 800 block of West Main Street was based completely on student work, but submitted by a resident of that proposed historic district. In Champaign, both local historic districts they have, as well as 12 out of 27 local landmarks, were prepared by students in my classes at the University of Illinois and submitted by these students. And in almost all cases, the students were never there. They were never able to attend the meetings when they presented, or when they should have presented. 2 historic districts and 5 individual Urbana properties are listed in the National Register of Historic Places, based completely on student work, prepared and submitted by students who worked under in my classes. Students in UP 420, Planning for Historic Preservation, have surveyed over 1,000 Urbana properties and created individual survey forms for these, which has substantially created the Urbana Historic Resources database. The survey form for one of these properties, for 508 West Elm Street, the Bills House, together with the city's demolition delay ordinance, was at the core of that particular house being saved from demolition. And instead, rather than being demolished, the house was beautifully renovated and is creatively used as a house for international students. With regard to the issue of the applicant needing to be present to present evidence and to answer questions, the submission of the project had been scheduled so that the applicant would be present for the May meeting. It was the property owner's choice that not be heard and that they have extra time to consider the application, and we had not planned for that. In fact, I would consider that participation in the meeting to be a benefit to students and to be an important part of the learning experience. But the issue of presenting evidence is legalese based on a case from Lisle, Illinois. Anyone who has ever prepared one of these applications would put absolutely everything you know in the application. We don't withhold information to save for another time. After all that was made of this issue by the Champaign lawyer, her lawyer babysitter, and the council, Brianna Kraft was brought in to answer questions. She took 2 days off from her job. She flew in from Washington, D.C. to Chicago, drove down from Chicago, stayed with a friend overnight here to accommodate her presenting to the city council and to save expenses. She summarized her application and addressed issues that had repeatedly come up in previous meetings, adding that to her, spending 6 years here was indeed significant. And in fact, she told me that she wasn't even ready to leave. She was excited about starting a new job, but she loved it here so much, leaving was hard. So in response to her efforts, nobody asked her any questions. Nobody thanked her for accommodating the city council request, and nobody thanked her for her outstanding documentation. And no matter how you voted, you could not possibly argue that her documentation was anything but outstanding. So what kind of lesson is that for students, for our students and for our alumni residents in this community? Furthermore, the council had no discussion. Several issues had been bounced around. Several issues had been bounced around, chiefly at the suggestion of the Champaign lawyers, and while council had had some discussion in previous meetings, the reason for the final determination of this issue was not clear to me. Do the citizens of this neighborhood, our city, not deserve to have a clear understanding as to why 3 council members voted against historic preservation, against our neighborhood, and against our community? Common sense would tell me that in the next year, work on the house would be unlikely. The out-of-state property owners have done nothing more than boarding up the house in the last 4 years. We, the neighbors of this behemoth historic property, are apparently to be grateful that the lawn has been mowed and that the driveway has been chained off so that the parking lot will not occur in the front yard, which happened 4 years ago when the house was vacated. Finally, I hope that you consider the property tax implications of the house being vacant. The empty house is, of course, a tax advantage to the property owners. Just this year, the assessment of the building was reduced from $250,140. May I just finish a couple of sentences?
I'd like to offer 2 more minutes for her to wrap this up.
The assessment on the building portion of the property was reduced from $250,140 to $114,060, which likely will result in a substantial savings to the property owners. So now they have received your additional support and encouragement by a failed landmark designation. I assigned this particular property or made this property available to this student because I thought it was a slam dunk for significance. It was like handed to you on a silver tray. I've lived in my West Urbana house for 11 years, and I marvel daily at the magnificent qualities of our neighborhood. My house was built in 1933. I, too, have an original roof, and I have those same steel casement windows that the sorority house has. I love my house. I cannot think of a more perfect house for me, but I take care of my house. When is that going to count?
Eric?
Oh my gosh. Okay, I've lost my microphone somehow. Ms. Novak, I did want to say something briefly and ask you a question, or ask a question relative to the Preservation Commission. And I want to preface my comment, my question, by saying that I agree with you completely.
Thank you.
My interpretation of what happened is that we were faced with an attorney who followed one of the first laws, informal laws of law, which is when all the facts are against you, argue a process. And unfortunately, that prevailed enough. But I do have a question about the relationship between this body and the Preservation Commission, because I understand that it is at least a tradition for members of the Preservation Commission not to address the council or speak up at the council meetings. And I don't see any either legal or ethical reason for that. And I'm especially concerned about it in this case, because in point of fact, it was only an informal discussion after the penultimate meeting that in a discussion that was immediately after council meeting, that the attorney at the plan commission meeting had that you were offered as a surrogate, and that to defend the issue, and that the procedures specifically account for that. So there had been no violation of procedure anywhere. I mean, that was a total smokescreen, but unfortunately, it carried enough weight to block the designation. But one of the things that I'd like to ask Mr. Simon is there any reason, either from your perspective, either an ethical or a legal reason, why members of the Plan Commission should not address the council when these cases come up?
Other than when a commissioner is the nominee. They cannot appear before the council in their capacity as a commissioner. But not only the ordinance, but the zoning ordinance, but also the bylaws specifically allow commissioners to be nominees, or nominators, I guess you would call them, and that when they are such, they stand in the capacity as any other nominator and therefore can participate at the commission level as the nominator, and they could participate if they choose to before the council as the nominator, but not as the commissioner. Now, the other part of your question is, if they are not the nominator, there is absolutely no bar in our ordinance nor any other standard of ethics or conflict of interest for a commissioner to refrain or to participate as a commissioner. If the commission makes a recommendation for or against a particular application, like any other staff, they can come before the council and present their reasoning for whatever it is they're recommending. As far as what happened last week, the issue of constitutionality being that the ordinance is vague in terms of this, as well as when the council must consider this, it is not unconstitutionally vague. We didn't have a chance to address that. Absolutely not unconstitutionally vague. That was a false argument completely, because the council rules provide, and the council did exactly this, two council members can defer any matter, and then it comes up at the next council meeting. Then it requires a 3/4 vote of the council to defer one more time. So there clearly is, not within the ordinance, but within your rules and process, an end date for any of these, any matter for that matter, that is sought to be deferred through that particular process.
So I guess I would then just, in the context of that, I would just, I don't want to blame the victim. You didn't do anything wrong. The case was great, and there was nothing wrong with the process that I could find. I thought all of the things that the attorney said were incorrect. All of her objections were wrong. But even so, I guess I think one lesson that we might all take from this is that we should invite you and hope that you'll avail yourself, or members of the Preservation Commission, to address the council if you think it'll be helpful in forwarding your views.
I think absolutely. I mean, if I hadn't had a conflict of interest, I would have been happy to come in and have spoken, and I know other commissioners would as well too.
But actually, you didn't. I mean, this is what I'm hearing Mr. Simon say, is that you didn't have a conflict of interest.
I just want to ask a point of order for a second, because this item is actually not on the agenda. And so now we're getting into a discussion of an item that is not even listed on the committee of the whole. Any member can ask for reconsideration of any item that's already gone before, but this is not actually on the agenda. And so I asked the chair to rule for us to stick to the agenda, because there are many views on this and other issues. We lose votes all the time. But in this case, it is not on the agenda.
But this is public input.
Well, exactly, that's public, but you're a council member who's speaking to an issue that's not on the agenda.
I don't think I'm out of order, but
I'm going to reluctantly rule against you, Carol, because it is public forum, but I really do think in an effort to wrap this up, we should just kind of move it along and maybe study this some other time.
Eric, let me answer your question, Ms. Novak. If you had appeared last week as either public input, an interested person, or as the nominator, but not wearing your commissioner hat, you would have no conflict of interest. But if you appeared as a commissioner, you would have a conflict of interest. You can't be both an interested party and a commissioner. And that's what your bylaws specifically provide, and the ordinance.
Bill?
Okay. I just wanted to respond to your point that no one thanked Brianna, and I think that's important. I apologize for not thanking her. I agree that students do a lot of stuff in our community. I've worked with a lot of students that have done landscape designs that were used. They help as interns on street projects. We benefit tremendously from students, and I think that was a specious argument that the students shouldn't have done that, and they do provide a lot. They do a lot of the legwork that wouldn't have gotten done otherwise, and for all the historic preservation nominations that weren't opposed and students did the legwork on, we never would have gotten those passed. So I hope they still keep doing that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Dennis?
Yeah,
and Alice, I'd like to ask you to convey to the Historic Preservation Commission our need to hear their support of their nominations. They are the individuals who are the most adept at understanding the background of them, and they provide us with specific criteria which we can appreciate these buildings from. And I've often rued the fact that they felt obliged not to appear or to speak, and now we're finding out that it's totally appropriate for them to do so. So we're learning as we go, and I hope that this conversation brings us much more wealth of information and support from your commission. So please, I hope you would bring that information to them.
I will. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? All right, thank you. Rebecca, no last name. Bike lanes on Broadway. What's your last name, Rebecca?
Nathanson.
Can you spell it for me, please?
Nathanson. I'm a resident at 103 West California Avenue. I've been a graduate student for 2 years. I'm a bike commuter. And I've lived in quite a few places, actually, including St. Louis for many years and Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I can tell you Urbana is my favorite place I've ever lived because it's so walkable and bikeable. I walk and bike to work, walk and bike to the grocery store. It's such a privilege and makes me feel noticeably healthier and just more productive, happy person. So I love living here. I also am advocating for the bike lanes on Broadway because as a bike commuter, I feel safer when I'm in bike lanes. I feel that when I bike in the bike lane, I have more credibility. I feel less vulnerable. And living at the corner of Race and essentially Broadway, California and Broadway, I live at 103. I see a lot of traffic actually on Broadway, and cars do go pretty fast when you approach the intersection of California and Broadway. I always have to make sure that I look multiple times and make sure that cars aren't zooming down there. So I do think bike lanes there would make bike commuters, other graduate students, and also students who attend the high school there. You know, I see lots of middle school students, high school students coming down Broadway. I think they head to Lincoln Square Mall. And I know that I see many of them bike on the sidewalks. And that's also, I think, a safety issue for other pedestrians. So bike lanes would really assist students like myself and other members of the community feel safer, less vulnerable to car traffic. And ultimately, I think it's an issue of inclusivity and access, making transit accessible and inclusive. So thank you.
Rob McClintock, parking on Broadway.
My name is Rob McClintock. I live at 3304 South.
Can you please use the microphone, sir? Please use the microphone, sir.
I'll move over. My name is Rob McClintock, and I live at 3304 South Race in Urbana. I own a lot of properties in the Race Broadway area, and I feel, my apologies to Miss Nathanson, that parking issues on Broadway should overcome the putting in of the bike lanes. That street is jam-packed with cars all the way from Washington to Illinois and beyond when the high school students are here. If you take away parking, they're just going to go somewhere else in the neighborhood. As it is during the day when the high school is open, owners and residents of Broadway can hardly ever find a place to put their car. So allowing that I'm a bicyclist too, and appreciate that Urbana has thoughtfully put in bike lanes here and there, stand against it in this particular case. Thank you.
Bow, B-Y-I.
That's me.
All right. More bike lanes.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bao Bui. I'm a graduate student at the University of Illinois. I've been here for 6 years now, and I live at 3112 West Springfield, corner of Birch and Springfield. Before I came to Urbana, I lived in 20 different places around the world, that's including 3 different continents. And I can say that Urbana is my slice of heaven. I think it's the perfect place to be in all the world, and I would like to spend the rest of my life here and buy a house here in Urbana and pay property taxes to support the city of Urbana. Yay! Even though many people have told me to buy a house in Champaign instead. Boo! One of the things that makes Urbana my slice of heaven is that it is a very walkable and bikeable town. You can get anywhere basically by walking or biking. Like many people in this town, whether they're short-term residents or want to be permanent residents like myself, we bike everywhere to go to work, to go grocery shopping, to go visit our friends, even to go downtown clubbing sometime when that's possible in downtown Urbana. And so I would encourage the city to support more bike lanes because I think it would make this town even better than it already is. And yes, I think it would be a wonderful, wonderful addition. It would also encourage, be a wonderful aspect that would encourage many other people to consider staying in Urbana and becoming homeowners and good property taxpayers as well. So that's, yes, that's all I have to say. You can ask me any question you want.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Esther Pat.
Hello, Esther Pat, 706 South Kohler Avenue. I saw online that there's going to be discussion tonight about an ordinance or some change of which staff positions are going to be or should be subject to mayoral approval and which not. And I wanted to share with you just a little perspective I have because I served on the Urbana City Council for 11 years. In the context of one case that caused you to be concerned about this, you may be thinking about this as a way to limit the mayor's authority, but if you change, if you cut most positions that are now subject to mayoral appointment from that process, what you're actually doing is limiting the city council's authority. And I think you should really reflect on not just one case, but all the cases on whether you want to do that. When I was a city council member, the first year I was on the council, the mayor and the human rights officer had a diversity training for senior city staff. At that training, a police officer got up, right when Lenita Eppinger was trying to explain how every African-American young man who has baggy pants is not a gangbanger, a police officer got up, pulled out his service revolver, pointed it at individual employees and said, "Are you afraid? Are you afraid?" This was his protest against the notion that anyone in the police department needs to have a workshop on racial sensitivity. A year later, I opened my council packet and found that this same officer was being proposed as Assistant Chief of Police. Now, if Assistant Chief had not been a position subject to mayoral appointment and therefore council approval, I would have not even known about it until after he was already Assistant Chief. But because it had to go through us, those of us who were concerned about this had an opportunity to express our concerns. A majority of the council members did not want to go against the mayor on this decision, and so it did pass, and he did become Assistant Chief, but at least there was newspaper coverage of what happened and what the problem was with him, which I hope would at least protect against this man ever becoming Chief of the Urbana Police Department. There are people besides department heads and the top administrator who play key roles in city government, in public relations with the community, in managing grants, in managing money, and they should not be treated like civil service employees. There's a reason many positions at the University of Illinois are academic professionals who are subject to annual approval rather than civil service, and there's been some controversy about which positions, but top people who have the kind of authority to decide whether or not to apply for a grant, how to implement the policies you pass, should not be treated just like civil service employees, that unless they steal money or hit a fellow employee, that you don't fire them. You should have the option to not have to make a choice of firing or not firing, but to be able to decide a person is not to be reappointed because in the conduct of their job, no matter how long they've been here and how good they were, and this person was probably a good officer in many ways, that there are positions that require judgment and certain kinds of performance that if you feel someone is not living up to that, you should have the power to decide not to reappoint them. Consider that and think of big picture, not just one case, before you make any change that will affect all positions in the future. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay. Diane Marlin.
Hello, I'm speaking on behalf of Alderman Eric Jacobson and myself. And
Sorry, one moment.
My name is...
I think the mayor wants council to speak.
It's my understanding, well, obviously, we can't limit and shouldn't limit public input, but it's my understanding that council members Marlin and Jacobson wish to address the council on personnel matters, and based on reading of the press reports today, that those issues arise directly out of the matter involving Ms. Walden's non-reappointment. As counsel for the city, I would strongly encourage that the council, all council members, not just council members Jacobson and Marlin, refrain from making a public comment on this topic. Ms. Walden has threatened litigation against the city, and I think any comments could be extremely damaging to any defense the city would choose to mount. So, but obviously, this is just the advice of council, but I do recommend that at least the council and the mayor and all employees of the city refrain from public comment on this issue.
Eric?
With all due respect, Mr. Simon, I think you are not accurately characterizing what we have said or what we are saying or what we have presented in our document. We are talking about policy. We are not talking about any personnel matter. We have not mentioned any personnel matter. And we've actually gone out of our way not to do that. I'm pausing because I'm thinking a little bit more about how to respond to you, because you have caught me unawares. But what I would be, well, I don't know. I'm only speaking for myself, and I'm thinking out loud, as we often have to do at council meetings because of the Public Meetings Act. I would really like to hear from you or from the mayor directly if you think it's not timely to raise this issue now of our human resource policies. When would it be timely? Surely you don't mean to say that we can never review human resource policies. So my question is, if not now, when?
Clearly, I am not saying that you can never review human resource policy. That would be folly on my part to even intimate or suggest that. Clearly, you have as council, it is within your authority to consider that. My concern is purely as somebody who has handled litigation, including employment litigation, for 35 years. There is nothing more that a plaintiff's attorney would enjoy than to pit two council members or council members against each other, divide and conquer. When I've been a plaintiff, I've used that quite frequently, quite effectively. If you want to get into a more detailed discussion, I would be more than happy outside of the meeting, outside of the Open Meetings Act considerations to discuss this with you. And at any time you would like to discuss it, I'd like to do that. But I do not want to, in an open meeting, violate the attorney-client privilege that vests with communications regarding threatened litigation and pending litigation between me and my client.
So what I would like to discuss, and I don't know, Diane, I'll defer to you if you want to, go ahead and present this. But if we do discuss anything, I'm not really concerned about discussing the pending litigation. As far as I'm concerned, I don't need to know about that. But what I would like to know is what timetable you and what timetable the mayor envisage would be timely to raise the issues about our overall human resource policies.
I can't speak for the mayor. She can speak for herself on the issue if she chooses to. My recommendation would be to wait until litigation is filed and see where the litigation goes. Issues of reappointment typically arise in May or June at the close of a current fiscal year in the context of appointments or reappointments for the following fiscal year. So I think, depending on if there is litigation, it's been threatened, but we don't know if there will be any, if litigation is filed, that you at least wait 6 to 8 months or until next, I guess it would be May and June and then reassess at that point in time. In the interim, you can always reassess where everything is at that point in time. I do notice that out of all of you've provided me with you've provided a table, a spreadsheet of appointments, and there have only been 2 changes of appointments in that entire period out of all the appointee positions and all. But again, it's a matter of policy, and you all make policy.
I want to defer to Diane to.
As you know, we proposed 4 specific actions that Eric and I believed would provide for a more professional and positive workplace, and that's based on conversations that we've had with many individuals and in response to the resignation of our acting comptroller. Out of respect for what you said tonight, I'll refrain from reading these into the record as I intended, but I will say, and I'll read our beginning statement, is that we believe that it's timely for the City of Urbana to review its personnel policies and procedures to ensure that we have consistent, fair, and clear employment practices, and we must follow generally recognized best practices in human resource management for all employees. Our motivation in this was to seek a professional workplace that focuses on service to residents and business of Urbana, and one that encourages collaboration, innovation, and creativity. And we believe that our proposals address that. I'll be willing to wait to discuss that until a more appropriate time, but you can be sure that we will be discussing this. And the public expects us to respond to the events of this summer, and I certainly couldn't not respond to the events of this summer. So we'll take it from here, but we have shared our ideas with the council and the mayor, and we will be following up on those over the next few months.
All right, is there any other further public input? Carol? You have the floor.
I'll just make one very unrelated comment, but it's related. Unrelated, but related.
Exactly.
I'm going to make this comment because it's important. Esther just pointed out a couple of things. In her earlier public participation, she spoke to the lack of enforcement in housing. As we look at the picture that still exists up here on the screen, it really behooves me to wonder, I just got here, why we are not enforcing A, and B, why this has not taken center stage to designating a historic landmark. I'm concerned about the conditions of poor people in the city of Urbana, people who cannot afford housing, which is something I do every single day, try to find housing, rent assistance, food, for the people who cannot afford to do applications for historic preservation. Yet it doesn't get the kind of response that the bike lane gets. I think the priorities of the community are a little bit out of whack. And the other part of it is, as Esther just pointed out, yes, we need to talk about policies, but they need to be talked about in the proper context. Inclusive policies should be on the table when considering policies from this board to our staff. So we have departments in this city with no African Americans, no Asians, no Mexicans, no anybody else of color in those departments. And so if we are going to review, we need to review the entire process of the city of Urbana and put our priorities in place that deal with the well-being of the public in relationship to poverty, lack of housing, lack of jobs, and those areas where people are being systematically excluded. And if we are not able to do that, then we have done nothing. To protect those who are at the top is very concerning for me. And so I just wanted to make an unrelated but related comment.
Is there any further public input? Seeing none, I will, for agenda items 5 and 6, I will yield the chair to Dennis because I have a conflict of interest as a liquor license holder.
Okay, so we have here some public input, but first we're going to I'll just read the ordinances. Ordinance number 2013-08-067, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class A liquor license for VIP Banquet Hall Incorporated at 1506 North Cunningham Avenue. And following that, ordinance number 2013-08-068, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class B liquor license, BBB liquor licenses for Kroger Limited Partnerships 1 at Ruler 253 store at 2010 South Fowler Road. Do we have any, Mayor, you're the liquor license grantor. Do you want to comment on that?
I am the liquor commissioner.
The commissioner.
Applause? No applause.
Would you like to make any comments
I would like
first?
to say that both of these businesses seem like they're well qualified to have a liquor license responsibly, and so I would recommend that they both be granted a license.
We have two public inputs at this time, so I'm going
Can I
to
just ask the mayor a quick question?
Go ahead. Yes, Carol.
I don't have enough information about how liquor licenses are requested and approved, but I just wanted to ask, this is only my second one since I've been here. Each time the document just simply strikes the number before. Is there a ceiling of liquor licenses for the city of Urbana?
That is the ceiling, so it's up to the council to decide if the request is something that you want to grant.
So the ceiling is the strike?
The ceiling is the number that we have in the ordinance, and if we want to add one, you would raise the ceiling by 1. If someone goes out of business or doesn't want to renew their license, it automatically lowers the ceiling by 1. So we don't have any vacancies ever, and that gives the council the power to decide whether that business should be granted a license.
Yeah, that gives review process. Yeah. So let's have public comment before we get into our debate in city council level. I'll have the two people who come forward who want to speak at this time. First, Victoria Gonzalez. Do you want to come forward again? You said that if there were any questions, but you might as well have a chance to. Well, if there are any questions for Victoria, and her liquor license has to do with the VIP banquet hall, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right. Any other comments from you, Victoria, at this point?
I can just ask her
Go ahead,
what
Carol.
the VIP banquet hall is and what it's going to do.
Okay, well, right now it's operated as a banquet hall where people have their receptions, Sweet 16s, and as a Hispanic, we have a lot of those. Right now, Martin Fuentes owns it. He's my uncle, so I'm picking it up from him. And I'm going to continue to work as he's working.
And can you tell us where that business is located in Urbana?
1506 Cunningham, right on...
Cunningham. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mucha
suerte.
And Michael Vaughn, would you like to come forward and you have, oh, I see. You said that you were in support, but you didn't want to address the committee, so you don't have to if you don't want to.
I'm just here representing Ruler Foods and
Okay.
the Kroger Company for if there was any questions for us.
Okay, and we all know that's on South Fowler Road. Any questions? Okay, thank you for being present. Oh, the mayor?
Well, we're very glad you moved your business there.
We're very happy to be
It's
there.
been empty for a while, so welcome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. We're having a great time over there right now.
Okay.
Very
thanks.
good. Glad to have you in town.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Council discussion?
Dennis, there were 3 liquor license applications. Are we
Oh,
gonna do
yeah,
the
there
third one
is, isn't
separately, or, well, I was going to say we should just move each one and get it out of here. So I'm going to
Yeah.
move ordinance 2013-867, which is the VIP lounge, to council with a recommendation for approval.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay, Carol. Okay, Charlie Smythe and Carol, Diane Martin, what am I saying? Any other discussion? Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say same. Okay, none.
Okay.
All right, that passes. Good, that'll be
Dennis,
sent to-
did we pass 3?
I want to do the second one. I'll do the second one now.
We're only talking about the 2 here at the
Oh,
moment.
the original 2? Okay.
Right. Okay, and that'll be forwarded to City Council for approval. Okay, Charlie Smythe.
Okay, ordinance 213-868, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 343, increasing the number of Class Triple B liquor licenses for Kroger Limited Partnership, doing business as Ruler Number 253 at 2010 South Fowler Road. I move that we send it to council with a recommendation for approval.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Eric got there first. All right. Any other discussion on that one? Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we all are ayed up on that one. So
I
that's
oppose.
Oh, you are opposed? Okay, thank you. We have one opposition. All right. And there's one more. Did you want to? No, there's three. Off you go. All right, so the last one is ordinance 2013-08-069, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of R2 liquor licenses for Matthew Kitzmiller Pizza M at 208 West Main Street. Is there any discussion on this? There's not a public comment point.
I move that we send this to council with recommendation for approval.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. So, again, 6-1. That resolves those three items on the agenda. And I have to return this back to you. Yes, you're welcome.
Were there a couple that were skipped? Like
No.
number 5 and 6?
5, 6, and 7 we've just done.
Oh, it's been reordered. Okay, thank you.
That's an amended there you go, sir.
Okay. Agenda item number 8, an update on Kuwat's University Traffic District Study. Bill?
Thank you. As a brief introduction, the memo went into some length to go through a little bit of the history, especially for the newer council members, of just what is the Campus Area Transportation Study. This all began back in 1997 through the beginning of CATS 1. Then there became, which was a study of safety issues on campus. Then there was CATS 2, which was kind of the concept design plans. Lots of public input, lots of discussion, and a resulting report from that. We now, for the last several years, have been in what's called CATS 3, which is regularly scheduled meetings to discuss with all the agencies on campus, which is the cities, the university, MTD, IDOT, to share information, share projects, make sure they're coordinated together. The University Bicycle Master Plan update was like one example of what was being done during the CATS 3 process. Kuwat staff did receive an IDOT grant, 100% grant, to do a traffic circulation study. I'd like to introduce to you Sharif Ullah, who is one of the transportation engineers in the Kuwat staff. He's been the principal author of the study and has a presentation tonight. There's a lot of content in this evening, and we realize that we don't expect necessarily any final outcomes tonight, but would like to bring this up at a subsequent meeting if the council so wishes. But we're looking ultimately for at least what I would call an acceptance to the study. There's a variety of suggestions and recommendations that Mr. Ullah will go into tonight, and I'd like to present it to him and make the presentation.
Thank you very much, Bill. Honorable Mayor and Council members, thank you very much for the opportunity. As Bill already mentioned, that the University District Traffic Circulation Study, it's nothing new for the University District and the cities of Champaign and Illinois, because our university is in the core part of this region, and it basically dominates the traffic circulation pattern for a core of the region. And as you all know, that the University of Illinois campus is the biggest traffic generator within the Champaign urban East area. It has more than 44,000 students, more than 10,000 faculty and staff, and the University District is a thriving place where the major travel modes constantly interact with each other. And the providing safe and efficient traffic circulation within the University District has been the biggest transportation challenge for the concerned stakeholders. So as the background of the study, as Bill already mentioned, that since 1997, numerous studies and plans were completed addressing these transportation issues within the University District, most notably the Campus Area Transportation Study, in short it's called CATS, Phase 1, which was done in 1999, and then Phase 2, which was completed in 2005. And this study can be termed as CATS-3, and it aims to address the issues related to safe and efficient traffic circulation within the university district. So in terms of the study objectives, the first objective was to identify the improvement needs to the existing traffic circulation system. Secondly, to create a pedestrian, bicycle, and transit-oriented circulation system in the campus while maintaining necessary access for emergency service and also other service vehicles. Sorry, let me go back to the third objective. And thirdly, to recommend traffic management, including parking consolidation and other control strategies for university-related traffic to ensure a safer and smoother transportation network for the campus area and the area surrounding the campus. So I have the map of the study area here. So the area encompassed by the red dot is the university district study area. So on the west side, we have the railway track. On the south side, we have Windsor Road. On the north side, we have the University Avenue. And on the east side, we have Lincoln Avenue. And within this particular area, you can see other area encompassed by different colors. And you can see Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3. These zones were selected as part of CATS-1 study in 1999. And those zones were predominantly for taking decision about traffic circulation and traffic safety. I will explain more about those zones later as part of my presentation. And the study's stakeholders, this study was sponsored 100% by the Illinois Department of Transportation. Local agencies which are involved, first of all, the University of Illinois, and then we have the City of Champaign, the City of Urbana, and the CU Mass Transit District. And the study staff is the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission, which is also the Champaign Urbanist Area Transportation Study, which is the local MPO as part of the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. So the study involves 10 major tasks, which we have already undertaken. So first of all, it started with creating a study advisory group, and then to review of existing plans and policies, existing conditions analysis within the university district to create different alternatives to try, and then analysis of outcomes of different alternatives. Then we went for public workshop number 1, and then we decided on what would be a preferred traffic circulation plan for the university district. Now we are working on implementation plan, and we have our public workshop number 2 in early September, and then to finalize the plan and to submit it to all the stakeholders and also our study sponsor. And the duration of the project is 24 months. So I have the study status here. It started in October of 2011, and now it's August of 2013. So I'm glad to announce that we have made very good progress. We are slightly ahead of our schedule, and as I said, that by the end of mid-September, we hope to complete the study, and probably we'll come back to this particular city council again with the final plan. So as part of the existing conditions analysis, we looked at the existing land use, we looked at the traffic flow characteristics, we looked at the traffic growth, operational conditions, we looked at the pedestrian and bicycle facilities, we looked at the roadway and intersection geometric features, crash data analysis, transit service analysis, parking facilities. And as part of this comprehensive existing condition analysis, we have come up with some of the major findings. So number one, which actually can be a bit surprising to many of you, that we found that there is a reduction in traffic flow along major corridors within the university district. So this particular graph, which shows the major corridors within the university district, starting with the University Avenue, Springfield Avenue, Kirby, Windsor, First Street, 4th Street, Goodwin, and Lincoln, all of them actually showed significant decrease of traffic flow within a period of 5 years from 2006 to 2011. And as you can see, the highest decrease is for the 4th Street corridor, which is more than 30%. And we have also found that the speed is a factor for many of the streets along the university district. We have found that 85th percentile vehicular speed on some of the roadways within the university district was at least more than 10 miles per hour higher than the posted speed limit. So we have this map. I apologize for, it's a we have to cover a big area, so like, many of the things is probably not visible from your monitor. We have our website where we have the detailed map of everything. So I would refer, like, if you look at those for further questions, that would be highly appreciated. So basically what we did is we looked at the major corridors, we put our traffic counting and also speed measuring devices on those corridors, and we collected speed data. And based on these, we have prepared this map which shows the observed speed on the major corridors within the university district. And we also found that the traffic congestion is an issue, but it's for the intersection at the periphery of the university district. For example, First and Windsor, or Goodwin and University, or the Lincoln University during the morning and PM peak hours. Here we explain the level of service or how a driver would feel at a particular intersection within the university district. If you see green or blue, that means it's fine. If you see something red, that means there are some delays associated for vehicular movement. And if you see a particular red or a pink arrow, it shows the travel direction where you can expect more delays. And we also found that two of the most pedestrian-heavy intersections within the university district are located outside CATS Zone 1, which I showed as part of the study area, and 4 of the most bicyclist-heavy intersections are located outside CATS Zone 1. And then here we have the map. The pink area in the middle is the CATS Zone 1, and if you see a spot with a pedestrian moving, that means the pedestrian activities are highest in those locations. If you see a bicycle sign, that means the bicycle activities are highest in those locations. And if you see a car sign, that means the vehicular activity within the university district are higher in those locations. CAT Zone 1, it was designated as it should be dominated by a pedestrian and bicyclist in 1991. And what we have found that the pedestrian activity actually expanded east and west. And then now there are more pedestrian-heavy intersections or pedestrian-heavy locations outside CAT Zone 1. So now the traffic crashes. The traffic crash data which we analyzed as part of this existing condition analysis, it was from 2006 to 2010, and we found that 4 people died within the university district in between 2006 to 2010 due to traffic crashes. And here, this particular graph shows the amount, the number of fatal crashes, number of severe injury crashes, and minor injury crashes by year within the university district. And the good news is within the university district, the traffic crashes are showing a declining trend after 2007, as this graph already states. And then for the pedestrian and bicycle crashes, there was a spike of bicycle crashes from 2007 to 2009, and after 2009 it has been declining. For pedestrian crashes from 2006 to 2010, overall it showed a decrease, but from 2008 to 2009 there was a spike. And the Green Street Corridor, as you can expect, that the Green Street Corridor experienced the highest number of pedestrian, bicycle, and transit crashes within the university district. So here, this particular map shows all the paid bike crashes within the university district, and then if you look at the Green Street Corridor, which kind of in the upper middle part of this map, you can barely see Green Street because there had been so many crashes there. And then the corresponding color, if it is red, that means it was a fatal crash. If it is green, that means some injuries were involved, but it was minor. And now let's go after what we did once we have come up with the major issues within the university district based on our comprehensive analysis. So we have come up with many of the alternatives, what can we do to mitigate those issues? And those alternatives were not just selected randomly. So we had some specific plan, any alternative, we should consider this for the university district's traffic circulation, and then it has to meet certain criteria. So let me explain here. So we have looked at the study objectives. What are the study objectives we have? What are the findings from the existing condition report, and what do our member agencies say about their concern, or like, you know, what they hear from the concerned publics or the concerned citizen about their concerns. And we have taken everything together, and then we have come up with a list of selected alternatives, and then we evaluated those, and then we have assigned some scoring system to do further check on those. So we also looked at what are the other nationwide best practices for any big campus towns. So we looked at a possibility of separation of modes by building or improving infrastructure, say for example sidewalks, bike lane, bus lane, and then we have looked at intersection improvements, whether we can put pedestrian scramble, whether we can put leading pedestrian intervals, whether we can put no right turn on red. And then we have looked at particular corridors where we have issues, what improvements can be appropriate for those particular corridors. It could be roadway reconfiguration, which is also known as a road diet, converting one-way streets, thinking of bus-only lanes for some part of the regional roadway network, and then a capacity enhancement for the intersections where we have some congestion issues, whether we could do it through traffic signal retiming, whether we could do something corridor-wide signal coordination for the arterials. So for the evaluation of alternatives, this particular graph shows how we have evaluated any alternative. So first of all, we have checked it's for which zone. If it is for zone 1, it has to be in favor of pedestrian and bicycles. If it is zone 2, it has to be a balance of all travel mode. If it is for zone 3, which is kind of the periphery of the university district, where our mobility has higher importance because of the arterial streets, and then whether they meet certain criteria. For example, for zone 1, whether it promotes safer walking and bicycling, whether it discourages through vehicular movements within the core of the campus, and whether it maintains necessary access for emergency vehicles. So if all these criteria are fulfilled, and then it's listed as a alternative for further consideration. If any of these is negative through our analysis, then we have removed that particular alternative. So recommended alternatives for the university district. In this particular map, it's a sum up of what we have recommended. I will explain it more throughout my presentation later. But in this particular map, we have explained all the possible improvements we are going to recommend for the university district. So let me go by zone, and then whether it was short term. Short term means anything which can be implemented within 0 to 5 years. And then so for example, for zone 1, we have the alternative in column 1 in this particular table, and we have the responsible agencies, and then the evaluation criteria. What was their score out of 100? So for example, I'm going to read out 1 or 2 here. So for example, Matthews Avenue closed for through vehicular traffic between Green Street and Oregon Street. Only vehicles with parking permits will be allowed. And the responsible agency would be City of Urbana, and the evaluation criteria score was 100 out of 100. And then, for example, the last one is institute a 25 miles per hour speed limit on all roadways in the university district. And the responsible parties would be the cities of Champaign, City of Urbana, and the University of Illinois. And the evaluation criteria score it received, it was 70. So let me show you some of the visual renderings of what is going to change if we implement those particular alternatives. So for example, you all know that the intersection of Goodwin and Green is going through some major rehabilitation. So we are recommending a pedestrian scramble at the Goodwin and Green, something which is already in place for the right and Green intersection, and also for the 6th and Green intersection. So this is the before scenario here to my left, and then the after scenario would be, as you can see, that the roadway markings are changed, and the pedestrians will be allowed to cross the street diagonally, and then it would give them some added advantage by blocking or by assigning them certain mode time as their right of way. And we have talked about having contraflow bike lane on Daniel Street. It's the City of Champaign Street. And so this is the existing configuration here. And with the proposed change, the street will look something similar to this. And for the medium term, by medium term, we mean anything which can be achieved within a time span of 5 to 15 years. So once again, in column 1, we have all the alternatives, and we have responsible agency in column 2 and the evaluation score criteria. So as you can see that we are having a lot of alternatives, which includes adding more bike lanes or adding more pedestrian facilities. Say, for example, the first one, which says consider no turn on red provision for some of the signalized intersections from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then in the report, we have a particular figure which shows for which intersections we are going to recommend them, and the responsible agencies would be all the municipalities here. So this is the existing layout of Wright Street in between Armory Avenue and Daniel Street. And then with our proposed change, things will be a bit different here. And then we have similar roadway reconfiguration for Green Street and also White Street. I'm going to explain them here. So this is the Green Street in between Goodwin and Lincoln. This is the existing configuration. So the rightmost lane is now shared either by cars and buses, and we have a 15-feet raised median in between the two directional traffic. And with the proposed change, the rightmost lane will be designated for the buses only, and then the left lane will be for the vehicles. We are talking about separate bike lanes about on both directions, and then the raised median will still be there, but the width will be a bit short. And then alternatives for Zone 2. As part of the short-term alternative, we have some one-way street conversion, which is 5th Street, one-way northbound from Green Street to Springfield Avenue, and one-way southbound from Green Street to Daniel Street. And some other changes for some of the roadways in CAT Zone 2. So, for example, this is on the left side. This particular rendering shows how the 5th Street in between Green and John looks now, and with the proposed change, at the right side of the figure shows that Green Street traffic is only going southbound from Green towards John, and then how the parking layout and the lane configuration would look like with the proposed change. And same we have for the 5th Street in between Springfield Avenue and Healy Street, the existing and recommended configuration. And for the medium-term alternatives for Zone 2, I'm going to read out just one, which is applicable for City of Urbana. It's add bike lanes on Oregon Street from Goodwin Avenue to Lincoln Avenue. Similarly, we have one which is close Main Street to vehicular traffic from Goodwin Avenue to Harvey Street, and then some other considerations as well. So some of the visual renderings here. So for example, this is the existing condition for White Street in between 2nd and Wright Street. So we have a 8-foot parking lane, and then we have a 10-feet car or bus lane, and then we have a 10-feet car and bus lane. So with the proposed changes, White Street will be a bus-only corridor. So no automobile will be allowed there, and then we are recommending bike lanes for both directional traffic. For the 4th and Armory intersection, so this is the before scenario, or you can say the existing scenario. If you go to 4th and Armory, and then if you look north, the intersection would look like this. And with our proposed change, the intersection would look something similar to what we have on the right side here. So as you can see that we are recommending a traffic signal here, and also we are recommending a pedestrian scramble to aid the pedestrian movement at that particular intersection. So for the Zone 3, we have two short-term recommendations. One of them is for City of Urbana. I'm going to read it here. It's to prohibit left turn from the northbound and southbound approaches at the Lincoln and Main Street intersection. And then for Zone 3, we have some of the recommendation, which is medium term. Say, for example, Many of them are for University of Illinois. There is one which is applicable for City of Urbana as well, which is implement a road diet on Lincoln Avenue from Windsor Road to St. Mary's Road. And I have some renderings to show here. So this particular one is a 4th Street corridor. If you look north of St. Mary's Road towards Kirby Avenue, and after the road dieting plan and incorporating bicycle lane, the 4th Street corridor will look something similar to this. And this particular corridor is the existing Oak Street corridor if you look north of St. Mary's Road. And then this would be the after scenario with the road diet in place and also with the bicycle lane. So on my left here, it's the current lane configuration for Lincoln Avenue north of Windsor Road and south of St. Mary's Road. And with the proposed change, Lincoln Avenue would look something similar to what you can see on the right side, where we have a center turning lane or a median, and then we have bicycle lane on both sides. So the public engagement for any plan, public engagement is of utmost importance. So the first public open house, it was held at the University of Illinois Activities and Recreation Center. It was in the month of March, and the open house was a successful event with a lot of participation from students, faculty, and staff, and the study advisory group members. And then the participants were requested to vote on different possible alternatives for the university district, which I just discussed with you. And then the participants provided valuable comments on the study and voted on their preferred alternatives. So as you can see that we have received maximum votes for the roadway reconfiguration. This is something which has been tried within the community successfully. I would name some of the corridors, say for example, Lincoln Avenue, north of Pennsylvania, south of Nevada. I would say Green Street, west of Wright Street, and also Philo Road at the southeast Urbana, where we have successfully tried roadway reconfiguration. So and also, like, you know, the public opinion is very positive on this. The bus lane, people liked it. Pedestrian scramble, as you can see that there were about 63 people who provided votes, and as you can see that the maximum number of votes for those issues. There are some issues, or like, you know, people expressed some concerns about the one-way street conversion. It cost one-way street conversion, and also for the no right turn on red. It roughly received 45 to 50% of the public vote. That's why we have said that the overall reception is mixed for those. So we went ahead and are taken into public input here. We did some further analysis to show further analysis to our study advisory group members that why we are recommending one-way street conversion for 5th Street. I know that it's a street in the city of Champaign, but still city of Champaign, city of Urbana is part of the bigger community. So we all should know that what are the advantages and issues with one-way street conversion. First of all, I'll talk about the advantages. So one-way street simplifies the crossing for pedestrian as they encounter traffic from one-way from only one direction, and then fewer vehicle, and vehicle pedestrian bicyclist conflicts at intersections, and the accommodation of additional on-street parking or bicycle lane. And here I have the traffic crash facts for the 5th and Green intersection for a period of 5 years from 2006 to 2010. As you can see that this particular intersection had 32 crashes for that 5-year period, and 4 of them were severe injuries. Fortunately, there were no fatalities, but about 12 people were injured. And then if you look at the crash type, you can see that there was 1 pedestrian crash, there were 2 bicycle crash, and there were 22 angle crash. So if we just eliminate one direction of traffic, most of those angle crashes will be eliminated from that particular intersection. And then additional turning will be prohibited, and then the pedestrian and bicyclist, they will be more safer at that particular intersection. So for the no right turn on red provision is generally added for the signalized intersections where there are higher pedestrian volumes, say for example the right and Green intersection, or the Goodwin and Green intersection. So, and also there is a proven problem of sight distance for motorists conflicting with pedestrians, and it's a lesser risk for vehicle pedestrian conflict at signalized intersections with heavy pedestrian volumes. And there we have some intersections which currently has the no right turn on red provision, for example, Wright and Green, 6th and Green, and then Goodwin and Green, Lincoln and Green. So as you can see that they didn't have any fatalities, they didn't have any A injuries. A injury is the severe injury, which can be compared to paralysis or loss of limb, something similar to that. And then we are suggesting that more intersections would be under the no right turn on red provision, and we are recommending many of the intersections along 4th Street corridor. There are some and along 1st Street, and there is one within the city of Urbana, which is the Goodwin and Springfield Avenue as well. So as you can see that these intersections, they had at least 4 injury crashes over the 5 years of data analysis here. So if we incorporate no right turn on red there, then it's going to definitely add to the safety benefit of those particular intersections. And the CAD zone boundaries, as I said, that the pedestrian activity is getting bigger. It's not limited to zone 1 anymore. The zones were assigned in 1999, and it has been almost 14 years after that. And as part of this study, we are recommending that the zone boundaries should be zone boundary for zone 1 and zone 2 should be bigger. And these are our proposed zone boundaries for the university district on the right side of this map. Long-term recommended alternatives, we talked about some of the long-term recommended alternatives, for example, use of high-frequency transit connections for the university district, introducing a high-capacity transit corridors with improved passenger shelters, prohibiting semi-trucks at businesses at CAD Zone 1 for deliveries, and using a central receiving facility instead, and then enforcing periodic reduction or discouragement of on-street parking facilities on weekdays between 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. within CAD Zone 1, and then introduction of natural barriers, for example, green ditches or shrubs to channel pedestrian movements, and then introducing the Green State design practice, which is more sustainable design practice using of recycling materials and all those for the construction purpose and for the university district roadway corridors. So ongoing task, as I said, we are working on the implementation plan. We are outlining possible funding sources for to implement those alternatives. And then there will be a public open house, which is public open house number 2. And then it will be at the same location where we had public open house number 1, activities at Recreation Center on Thursday, September 5, 2013, between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. Good thing is we have cookies. So please come. And then and the last part would be completion of the study report. So, and we have the study website here as well. So all the documents, all the public input information, everything is there. And if you have anything, there is also a comment form and contact form. So like, please send your communication or concern to us. I will be glad to answer any of the questions. So that's what I have.
Just concluding remarks. Really, we have, as a community, a unique opportunity here to take advantage of this study. Virtually everybody has been to campus, whether by walking, biking, riding a vehicle, or transit. We all probably have had various experiences where if you could wave your magic wand, I wish this could happen, that could happen, I don't like this, I do like that. Sharif just went over a lot of information, overwhelming, and you're going to be tested on it later. No, just kidding. But the point is that, what we get out of this traffic circulation study is what we all put into it. So number one is I would urge you people in the community to attend the open house in September, to take a look at the study. It's literally not too late that if you still have some suggestions or recommendations to please provide those to us quickly, and to look at some of these suggestions, short-term, long-term, medium-term. I mean, yes, some have a lot of details to be worked out if, in fact, we ever do go through and implement some of them. But the point is that we have an overarching mission statement, and that mission statement on campus in the University District is to make it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. And yes, that can be at the expense of a vehicle, a car or a truck or that sort of thing. So you have to have some statement, some mission, some goal. And this goal was determined through the CATS-1 process, back in '97. This all was precipitated after a tragic fatality that occurred in the mid-'90s. So Please take some time, if you would please, to look at this. And again, we don't need all your comments and questions right now tonight, but I wanted Sharif to make this presentation. He'll do the identical presentation in the city of Champaign tomorrow night. He'll be back again at the very end when we're trying to wrap up that report and finalize it and seek your comments, questions, and acceptance. So anyway, questions?
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, I just want to say that I know there's a huge amount of work that goes into this, and I was at the meeting several years ago about changing Lincoln Avenue, and some people were disbelievers to that, but it really turned out to be very well thought through and very successful. So I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Dennis?
Okay, this is all very detailed and interesting, and it's interesting to watch how this document proposes significant change in almost every roadway on the campus and those feeders into the campus. So obviously we're going through like a huge change of consciousness about the use of roads, and the more we see bike lanes introduced and pedestrian crossings changed, it means that our relationship as people and how we move through our community is really changing. And it's reflected in the fact that the very structure, the diagram of the road is changed. So I find that very interesting. What I like to say, and I mentioned this before, and I don't know if it's Kuwat's prerogative or mission to accomplish this, but I think that one of the really missing pieces in understanding our community, and especially the biking community, is that I've never seen a map of the city showing where biking trips originate. How many and what is the dispersion of those people in this community who own a bike and take it to work? And I've never seen a map that shows what the concentration is in the various neighborhoods of this community of the bike owners and where they're headed. And I think that this is a huge hole in understanding the community, and I think it is something that needs to be addressed.
To answer your question, we are actually doing the bicycle plan update for City of Urbana, and as part of that, we are doing a comprehensive survey within the community. So we looked at all the census tracts within the City of Urbana, and then we have identified the population, and we have randomly selected a sample for the survey distribution, and we have mailed almost 1,300 surveys. I'm almost certain that some people in the room have received something from us, which is part of the bicycle survey, which talks about their nearest street intersections from which we would know, where they have originated, how many bike trips they have taken, and then through this we'll be able to come up with some map, the origin and destination map for the bicycle trip, which you have recommended.
So you're working on it, and is the survey going on right now then?
Yes.
Great.
And
so maybe in a year we'll see this map.
Yeah, and then I would like to make that we have received more than 200 responses already, which is very good. And then we are expecting...
Wait, 200 out of 40,000 people who live in Urbana?
We have sent our survey to 1,273 people. And then, those particular sample was selected. We wanted to have a survey which is statistically significant. Mm-hmm. And then, we are thinking about 95% confidence level and all those statistical things. And then it was sent among 1,273 people, and then almost 200 people already replied. If you look at the a paper survey, if you don't put any goodies there, you'll be having a gift card or something, or you'll be having an iPod, nobody would respond. I'm glad that 200 people responded without any goodies. It shows that the people are committed to biking and walking. So we are very glad. And then we are now collecting data. There are some issues that many of the apartments are vacant, and then it's in the month of July and August, and students move from one place to another, and we have received some of the mails which are back. But once the university will be in session again, we'll be resending some of the survey to those addresses again.
So is it possible to have this information included in some manner in the registration materials that students provide to the university, and that you could actually find out from students' process of their own registration for the university, where they live and what their bike use is? I mean, wouldn't that be a more effective and more a thorough response to some of your concerns?
As part of the a university mode choice survey, which was done in 2011, we have collected similar information. And then there the issue was, say for example, for the Illinois State Resident Hall, there is a big a bicycle concentration there.
Mm-hmm.
And then many of the trips are intrazonal. We tried to map them, but at the end of the day, it didn't make much sense because from Illinois Resident Hall, if somebody is going to engineering quad, it's kind of in the same TAZ, the traffic analysis zone. So at the end, for the university campus, it didn't make much sense to us to come to the public, but for this Urbana bicycle survey, it will be much more elaborate because it will be throughout the city of Urbana, and I hope we'll do something similar for city of Champaign as part of our travel survey, and then if you look at the region-wide bicycle chip distribution, that would be much more accurate.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
Diane was next.
I just had two things. One is I want to acknowledge what I think is the absolute success of Goodwin Avenue since it's been reconfigured. I worked near there for many years and rode my bike there a lot and drove there a lot, and it was a terrifying experience until it was redesigned to accommodate all types of vehicles. So I think that model for campus is an excellent one to follow. When it's that high of a traffic concentration with that many pedestrians and bicyclists. Secondly, I was amazed at the graph that showed the amount of traffic decreased in the past 5 years, and I was thinking, okay, that's got to be due to the recession and students not bringing cars to campus, people making decisions not to bring their vehicles to come to work to campus, students deciding to live closer to campus so they don't need a car. Do you expect, and maybe the high parking rates that FNS is charging, so do you expect that trend to continue, and how is that going to affect
Yes,
your
we expect this particular trend will continue. If you look at the corridors within the university district now, they have much more inventories than what it used to be, say, 10 years ago.
Much more what?
Much more inventories. I'm saying
Inventories?
say if you want to go for grocery shopping, so now you have Country Market. At the corner of 4th and Springfield, you don't have to make a bigger trip to Walmart or Meijer or somewhere. So there are more places where you can just walk and bike. We receive calls from the businesses saying that, hey, can you tell me what is the pedestrian volume on Green Street between 6th and Wright? I would like to open a business there. We did work with Walgreens on Green Street. We collected 24-hour data, how many pedestrians are going inside Walgreens and coming out. We didn't see, what they bought, but, we provided those data to Walgreens. The whole university district is kind of they are shaping in a way that it will be paid and bicycle oriented. So I see this trend continuing, and I would like to congratulate the city of Urbana and also city of Champaign City Council and the Public Works Department for all the decisions in favor of paids and bikes they have taken over the years. Your decision is working. So if I do an intersection design study, and my design year is 20 years from now, and if I say that instead of one through lane, I'm going to put 2 through lanes, and then I'm talking about millions. Adding additional right-of-way, and then the building materials and everything. For the Goodwin and Green intersection, the IDS was done for the first time, for this region with a zero growth calculation. We have shown Illinois Department of Transportation and also Federal Highway that over the last 10 years, traffic actually decreased significantly at Goodwin and Green. And then there is no point of assuming 1% traffic growth every year or 2% traffic growth every year. And then if you look at 20-year projected traffic, and then you will think, wow, let's add 2 more turning lane and 1 more through lane, what you see at Prospect. So the university campus is changing, and it's all because of your collective decisions. So, and I'm confident then, this is our core value for the campus, and with this particular study, with these recommendations, this trend will continue.
Can I make one more observation? There's a downside to that, and we've seen this with the concentration of student housing on campus. It means less demand for housing away from campus, and as more and more services such as grocery stores and other key, necessary services for students become concentrated on campus, it means perhaps less utilization of those businesses away from campus that people currently that businessmen currently depend on. So there's a trade-off there.
Yeah, you can say, but economics is not my major. But all I can say is there is an opportunity cost involved. So if we outsource some jobs overseas, those qualified guys will do something. So all those vacant lots at the periphery of the campus, I'm sure that in course of time there will be different land uses for which would serve the community.
Well, we have to deal with the consequences of that.
True, yeah.
Carol was next, and then Eric.
I appreciate Diane's comment. I was thinking of another constituency I didn't see in this presentation. I thought it was great. The graphics were great, and I think I can explain that to my son, who's 11.
I didn't show you the simulations. That's fascinating.
I thought it was great. The other part I thought about, though, which came up a few weeks ago, was people who can't bike, right? Seniors, people with disabilities were not considered in this plan, and if there would be some consideration for that with removing parking in certain locations on the campus. And the other thing is, I've been to a few communities where this has become the norm, where everything is actually constructed into the campus and the community around dies. And so as a council, not necessarily you, we have to also consider that when making the determination as to what we would be partnering with in relationship to this, and look at some of the other communities where economics suffered in the cities as we concentrated more services strictly in the campus area.
Eric?
So this is a small point, I think, but there's something that's counterintuitive to me, and now I can ask an expert. And that is, why no right turn on red when there's heavy pedestrian traffic? Because if I stop for a red light, and if I can make a right turn, but a pedestrian can't cross, then we're not conflicted. But if I wait for the green light, then the pedestrian wants to go at the same time that I'm free to go.
No, the way it works is, say, for example, you are traveling north on First Street, and you are at the corner of First and Kirby. So you got red light, and you are traveling north, and then you need to turn right. So when you got red light, then the pedestrian which are crossing Kirby Avenue, they have the right of way. So if you want to turn right onto Kirby Avenue, then you are actually conflicting with the pedestrians. We are trying to cross Kirby Avenue, not First Street. So when you have green light, then you have right of way to go through or make the appropriate turn. So at that time, then there is no right of way conflict there. So oftentimes people who are eager to turn right when the signal is red, and then they just look at the traffic from the opposite direction, they oftentimes don't pay attention that probably some pedestrians or bicyclists are trying to cross the street to their right. So they make this turn, and then oftentimes that particular conflict happens.
Any further questions or comments? Charlie?
Yeah, just a couple of minor ones here. A couple of your trends are very short, 5 years. I can't really pick them out as trends versus just statistical noise. There's stuff that bounces up and down. So I think you're going to need more than 5 years to convince me. I'm curious how a bus-only white street would work. What about deliveries and, the pizza guy and the UPS truck and the FedEx?
Oh, the delivery trucks will be allowed.
Okay, so deliveries would be allowed.
Yeah, there would be no automobile.
Okay.
So.
Okay, and then
no passenger vehicles or SUVs.
Yeah, and then so the delivery vehicles would be parking in the bike lane then.
The parking is not allowed. Yes, as part of the delivery, yes.
Yeah.
As part of the temporary, yeah.
You said one of the recommendations is to remove semis from Zone 1. What are the boundaries of Zone 1 again? I don't know if you can put them up real quickly.
At present, the boundaries of Zone 1, I think the west boundary is 4th Street, and let me go back to that.
is, yeah.
So we have Zone 1 boundary just south of Gregory and just south of Springfield, and then just east of Goodwin Avenue, and 1 block west of Wright Street. So
Yeah,
I think
I'm a little concerned because we have a couple of businesses on Goodwin that would be impacted, and potentially, well, it's not on Gregory, so that's not impacted in there. There are businesses in there, so that's outside of Zone 1. I'm just a little concerned about the businesses on Oregon, or on between Oregon and Nevada on Goodwin, that might be impacted by semis. You also have you have it drawn somewhat onto Oregon Street as well, and I know buses and occasionally the Canopy Club is in that area too. So there are some large vehicles there. So I'm a little concerned with the expansion of or the banning semis from that part of Zone 1.
I think if I could interject, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sharif, but the thrust of this comment has more to do with the university and all their academic and other buildings per se, that there would be some sort of central stores and that distribution of product would be done through some smaller vehicle.
Right.
I think private property owners would not be subjected to this. So
okay.
it's more like Carl, for example, has essential stores off of Busey Avenue, and then from that they distribute
Got
all
it,
the
got
product,
it,
you know,
okay.
through tunnels and such. Granted, this is a, you know, it's a dream at this point, but if implemented, it would help with a lot of conflicts with large vehicles that, you know, that are in the zone area. So the intent is really more for university properties, facilities.
Okay. And then my last one is Lincoln Avenue. You talked about it south of, on the south end, the very south end from Windsor to St. Mary's. Did I miss anything? Is there any discussion of road diet for Lincoln between University and Nevada? You know, we have the road diet between Pennsylvania and Nevada. I've had some inquiries as to about extending that further north to Springfield or even University.
I need to look at the traffic volume there again. I think those particular section was not considered because the traffic volumes are higher than 15,000 average daily traffic for those sections.
15. Yeah, it's in the high teens, and that's when 3-lane cross-section really breaks down. So it's the higher traffic volumes. University and Lincoln is in particular.
Yeah, University of Lincoln
high.
is one of the busiest intersections within the region, like Cunningham and also the university.
Yeah, I noticed that it was the only pink one on the Urbana side.
Yes.
And so are there recommendations for improving that then, that particular intersection?
Actually, it was, well, signals were upgraded just a few years ago by IDOT, so I'm not aware of any.
It's an IDOT intersection. Yeah.
Sharif, if you could, I'd appreciate it if could you email us that presentation?
Sure. Yeah, I
thank
will.
you.
Okay. If there is no further question, I would like to thank you once again for giving me the opportunity. Thank you very much.
So in probably 2 months, we'll come back seeking a recommendation from council. Yes. Is that about right? 2 months?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
2 months.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 9, ordinance number 2013-08-066, an ordinance amending Schedule J, Section 23-183 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code, prohibiting parking at all times on certain streets, namely Broadway Avenue. I have several. Hi there.
Hi. I'd like to introduce Craig Schunkweiler, Senior
All right.
Civil Engineer. Craig will
Are we
present.
going to start with is that what we do? Start with the presentation and then we move on to the comments? All right. I forgot that part. Thanks.
Craig will present this evening.
Thanks, Bill. The item before you is the consideration of on-street parking restrictions along Broadway Avenue between Washington Street and Illinois Street to facilitate the installation of bike lanes. This item went before the Traffic Commission at its July 2nd meeting. At the meeting, input was received from 3 residents against the removal of on-street parking. Those residents indicated a preference for Broadway Avenue to be designated a bike route and not to install bike lanes. Also at the meeting, it was noted that additional comments were received prior to the meeting by city staff from 2 residents in favor of the parking restrictions and 1 against them. At the conclusion of the meeting, the Traffic Commission moved this item to council without recommendation. After the Traffic Commission meeting, 2 residents living on the street notified city staff that they were in favor of the plan to remove on-street parking. If this item is approved, it would be implemented with the planned resurfacing of Broadway, which was originally planned for this fall but is now scheduled to occur next summer. I'm going to open it up to public comments, and then if you have any questions, you can pull me back up later.
All right, we'll do the public comments. Brandon Bowersox Johnson.
Good evening. Thanks for letting us speak tonight. You have a lot of tough issues, and thanks for listening and trying to make the best decisions for the city. I'm here to support the Broadway Avenue bike lanes and encourage you to vote yes and move this forward. This is part of the master plan that you approved, and I encourage you to follow through with it and implement it for 3 main reasons, and I'll try to be brief. I had served on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission since its creation and on the steering committee that helped guide the creation of the master plan, so I'll just give a few insights into this. First, we learned in the process of creating the plan that it's really critical for less experienced cyclists, especially, to have bike lanes, to have a dedicated space on the road where they can feel safe riding there without having to fight with traffic or have traffic buzzing right by them on a shared lane. And that especially means that that is important for the gender gap in cycling, so that women feel as comfortable as men cycling. And it also means that it's important to have a connected network from point A to point B, so that if I want to get from my home at Colorado and Philo to my destination at the Urbana Free Library, that I can take a connected set of bike lanes where I have that protected space on the road to get the whole way from point A to point B, rather than switching between types of facilities. That's not important for all cyclists, but that is important for the less experienced cyclists who are just getting out and riding, or maybe riding with children, or riding with bags and riding to do groceries. There are certainly other cyclists who are used to riding in any kind of traffic and are comfortable on University Avenue or Bradley Avenue or other places. But we tried to create a plan so that there were types of facilities for all these sorts of bicyclists. A network of bike routes where you could share with traffic, but also a network of bike lanes so that you could really get from point A to point B in places that you feel safe on the street. We looked at other ways to make north-south connections. We looked at Vine, we looked at Race, we looked at all kinds of other streets that were suggested by hundreds of people at multiple public input sessions, and weighed them using the best practices, the bike level of service computations, where the engineers plugged a bunch of variables in to see which streets would be safe. And Broadway was one of the north-south connections that made the most sense. It certainly is not perfect. None of the north-south connections in Urbana are easy. And Broadway is not a perfect one, but was the best connection in comparison to the others, so that people had a way to get a bike lane safely north to south through a key piece of town. Second, the importance of this has to do with slowing the car traffic. Regardless of any bikes at all on the street, we've learned that creating a bike lane and a narrower vehicle lane slows vehicle traffic. That's just proven by studies. Because cars have painted lines to stay within that are narrower, they will drive slower, and the street will be safer for pedestrians, for school children, for everyone there, not just for bicyclists. And that happened on South Race Street. That's happened lots of places where we've narrowed streets, and that has calmed what is otherwise, with a wide open street and a wide open lane, just a highway that people are encouraged to race down because of overly wide design of streets. So I think that's why bike lanes here are so much more valuable than sharrows or other types of facilities. And finally, if you're worried about the parking impacts, I will say from seeing us go through this process as a city before, it is definitely the case that residents are very passionate about their parking. And if you make any changes to configuration of parking, you will hear passionately from residents who are impacted, as we have before. And that's why in the plan we always tried to pick routes that would have the least possible impact on parking. In this case, I think it's good that parking would be retained on one side of the street, so people would just have to walk across the street to get to their car. And I think in the experience where we've had to do this in other streets, we initially hear discomfort from residents as they have to learn, to park across the street rather than on my side of the street. But after a few months, we overwhelmingly hear, I've heard, much more positive feedback from the people all over our community using these corridors as throughways to get from point A to point B. That positive feedback much outweighs the initial pain from residents in having to relearn to park across the street rather than right on their own side of the street. None of these options are perfect. I think all of this comes down to the trade-off between the safety for all the residents, especially school children, people going to the middle school or high school who want to safely get there or get to lunch, versus the inconvenience for parking right across the street for a few residents there. And given that choice of the safety for all,
Mr. Bowersox Johnson.
Given that choice of the safety for all versus the inconvenience, I think I would have to come down on the side of safety. And I guess just one other remark in this. I know Representative Ammons tonight was talking about what are our priorities. To me, when I know that a generation ago, 60 to 70% of school children were walking or biking to get to school, and now less than 30% of school children are walking and biking to get to school. And when I have a child who I want to be able to safely walk or bike and be an active, healthy youngster and grow up in our community with a safe place to do that, I think that is critically important, and that is part of the public health, safety, and welfare that is exactly the mission of this city. So I really hope you will spend the time to work through the details. In the past, I've really appreciated the Traffic Commission taking the time to figure out all the details and the widths and what to do about the guy who didn't have a driveway on Washington, and we helped make sure he had a driveway, the elderly man, so he had a place to park. All those details are very important, and I encourage you to take the time to get this one right and help provide safety for the public. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Carol?
So glad you said that, Brandon. I recently fell on my bike. I recently fell on my bike because I hit a hole in a curb because there's no bike lanes, not many A and B point connectors on the north side of the city. And therefore, I am totally bruised up on both sides of my legs because of the fall. So as I do see biking is important because my son will be going to the middle school. I encourage him to bike there. I'll probably follow him in my car because I'm a little spastic about him traveling by himself. But giving him the route from my house, though, I can't give him a straight A to B route. That's the concern that I'm raising.
Yeah.
And I think I've raised it with you before on this very issue. So we have a lot of bike lanes once we get out of certain areas that we can take to the rest of the point, but not in other parts of the city. And that is, again, the overall concern. Those who we are most concerned about not biking, health, gets the least consideration in the process. And I'd like to see that reversed, where the children who don't have a lot of money, have bikes, and need to really do it for health reasons, need to have access points that are safe as the rest of the community has. That is the concern that I'm raising on this issue.
Yeah, I agree. That's totally right.
Bill?
Yeah, Brandon, thanks. I agree that safety for our residents is the main concern here. And I was curious, you talked about this being in the master plan. That's a 2008 master plan, and you're currently updating the plan, is that right?
An update just started, yeah.
So I guess my question is, how much has the philosophy of biking changed between 2008 and now, as far as what roads deserve lanes versus sharrows, where you should position your bike in the roads? And do you expect areas in the plan that may have been designated lanes before to be designated sharrows or something else now?
I think the philosophy and the research has changed a little, and I hope that this next bike master plan clarifies, gives us some clearer boundaries of when a sharrow is more appropriate and when a lane is more appropriate, so that we have clear guidance going forward that we can apply to all situations. I think in this case, what we still know from the research and what hasn't changed is that bike lanes and narrower vehicle lanes slow the traffic and give less experienced cyclists a more comfortable place to start their journey as cyclists. And that has been consistent through the years. So in this case, I think the lane is still the best practice in the situation, and certainly in the update to the plan, which will be done a year from now, I hope that we're again looking at all the research and all the best practices and coming up with the right philosophy for sort of the next 5-year cycle going ahead.
Eric?
So what is, I don't know who the right person is to ask this, but what is the right mechanism to ensure that the concerns that Carol raised are met? How do we get that input into the planning process?
Well, we've not fully implemented the bike master plan. I mean, I don't even know if we're halfway there. So this is a year-by-year, step-by-step implementation, and slowly we're getting more and more connectivity as time goes on. And this is what's before you this evening, just another step in a 50-step process. So the map in your packet actually does talk about the ultimate build-out, and if there are areas unserved or underserved, that's all part of the bicycle plan updates actually process. So I think the very first plan was a good start, and we know we have 5+ years under our belt to fine-tune it and do better. And Mr. Bowers Johnson raised a point about the Sharrow bike lane issue. I can tell you, as someone fairly into the details of bike master planning, that nationally there's been a lot learned as to designing. Mr. Schunkelauer tonight has done some of the designs, and he's literally in some cutting-edge designs on some things too. There's a lot of non-specific details that we've had to do a lot of research on, Washington Street being one of them. So this is evolving. We're not a nation that's been biking on streets for 200 years, perhaps. I mean, in the type of detail we're talking about now. So there will be probably some significant, maybe I shouldn't say significant, but there'll probably be some updates and improvements on our current plan. And this is all part of the process. As we use it or as we interact with bicyclists, as we drive, we want to try to perfect. And there's so many things that still need to be done. There's some good things that have happened in the past. Education, enforcement, or other components we talk about. We're just talking about the engineering tonight. There's a lot to this implementation, and nationally, I think there's a lot of folks learning. So we're not the only ones that are in the crawling stage.
Madam Mayor.
Well, the question of Carol would be to go to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, right? And say that a certain neighborhood has an interest in this,
Yeah.
and that would start the process.
I agree, and I also think during this bike master plan update, we should make a concerted effort to get public input with the neighborhood, make sure that where we're planning facilities in all parts of town, that we don't leave any part of town out. I think making sure people are included as this process and the update to the plan happens is key.
Thanks.
Charlie?
To help answer that, if you take the new bike map that was put together by Champaign County Bikes, one of the interests that Jeff Yockey has raised was taking all of the blue, which represents bicycle infrastructure in our community, and having that as a separate layer, combined with the red circles on here, which you'll find red circles at intersections are difficult intersections for bicyclists and sometimes and usually pedestrians to cross. And if you take a look at that blue infrastructure with those red intersections, you can sort of identify areas where the community is lacking in infrastructure and where there are difficulties in making those connections. It's all about connections. and getting from point A to, what your point A to point B was. One of the, and that was an issue that came up in the redesign of this map, was finding a system to show people how to get from point A to point B without having to get on major highways or to get into what are considered busier situations. Not a lot of people can bicycle on University Avenue, but a lot of people can bicycle on the one-off streets north and south of University Avenue if they're not brick. So that's the other issue. We have brick streets that you have to deal with. You have potholes that you have to deal with. If you put a bike lane on an edge at the edge of the road, you got to make sure that it gets swept on a regular basis and that it doesn't have potholes. The 2 feet closest to the curb are usually they're trashed and they've got the most holes. Yeah, exactly. And so bicyclists need to ride away from the curb. And that's an issue I will take up later in tonight's discussion. But you can take advantage of the blue as a point to get started, and I'm hoping to raise this issue with RPC as they do the new bike map.
Any further questions? Thanks,
Thank you.
Brandon. Margaret O'Brien.
Thank you. My name is Margaret O'Brien. I live at 720 South Broadway. And I just moved from rural Monticello out in the country into the city. And I brought my bike, but I'm still too chicken to ride my bike in the city. So I would probably benefit from the bike route. However, I'm very concerned. I rely on street parking, and I'm also disabled. And if I figure I'll just park my truck in front and I'll walk everywhere. And I walked here tonight. I've been walking all I can. But once the high school kids come, from what I hear, there is no parking. And if you take away half of our parking, I just don't know what we're going to do. And when the weather gets icy and snowy and I have to park 3 blocks away from my house, it's going to be tough. So I wonder what the process is. I don't have anything against bike lanes or bike routes, but don't you also have to consider in the process how to replace the parking spots for the people who live there? And some of the people impacted aren't even there yet because apartment leases are frequently renewed around the August 15th, so there's people coming in now that don't even know this is going to happen. The other thing I would suggest is, and you probably have already done it, but why not increase parking at the high school or get the kids to carpool or walk or take a bus, something to help. This is nuts. And one last suggestion I saw in watching the presentation on city planning. Instead of parallel parking, what if we did diagonal parking? Could we cram more people parking on that street and still have the bike lane? So that's my 2 cents worth. This is my first meeting, and I'm thrilled to be here in Urbana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, and please remember to grab a bike map on your way out.
I did. I got one
okay.
at the farmer's
Good.
market.
Okay.
I got one.
Okay.
Michael Pollock.
Good evening. Get this thing in front of me. I'm going to have a little bit different perspective than you've heard from most of your council mates and the public this evening. I live at 710 South Broadway, so I'm in the middle of this neighborhood. I'm an avid biker. I'm out every day. I use that street daily and other streets around the city as well. I don't drive all that much, and this is not, for me, a not in my backyard type of thing, and I'm going to oppose this action this evening. I have a driveway, and outside of entertaining people or having folks over to the house, I have enough space to park. But there are many people in this neighborhood who do not. It is a very diverse neighborhood. There's quite a few residences that, in fact, do not have off-street parking at all. I was invited to our traffic commission meeting where this piqued my interest. And when I saw this, I got a letter from the city that said, we're planning on doing this, come and talk to us. It said, you're invited to attend the meeting to express your concerns, which I did. And in talking to people around the neighborhood, it became clear to me that there are some folks that really would have a problem with this. It's going to provide a major inconvenience, and there's a questionable trade-off in terms of bike safety in putting lanes in this particular limited 3-block area. And what happened at the Traffic Commission, just to tell you why I got upset about this initially, is that there were folks there who spoke opposed to this and wanted some more information. And what we heard, the Traffic Commission is made up of 3 people. One person could not make it that evening. They were not there. The other 2 kind of had a split opinion, and I think probably a no recommendation from the Traffic Commission is not the usual way that these things usually come to you. But we did have one person on that commission say, wait a second, the folks from the neighborhood have a valid question here. This is worth looking at. There's a new review that is starting, which is, I guess, a scheduled 5-year review of the plan. Why don't we take a look at that and see, perhaps we should reconsider this as part of the master plan. And a member of the city staff who was there to represent a particular point of view, in fact, said, our job is to pass this. It's in the plan. That's what we do. And so we should push this ahead. My question was, why can't we look at it? And if we decide later this is the right thing to do, and you've heard from the neighborhood and you've considered some of the parking difficulties which don't seem to be built into the process so far, then you can go back and restripe it. And the answer from the staff member was, we can't do that. We have to move ahead with this, and we have to move ahead with it now. And I never got an answer to that, and at some point I would like one. But to move ahead, there is right now on Broadway, there is no safety problem on Broadway. It's very wide. There's very little traffic, car traffic on that, unless you look at the 10 minutes right after school that's out each day at the high school. There is no bike safety problem. I ride my bike on that street daily, and many other people do as well, and it does make sense because Race Street and Vine Street, I ride those occasionally. Broadway, I think, is probably the better route. But there is no tie-in to a bike path on Washington, and there's none planned. There's no bike path in Illinois right now, although I understand that is in the master plan to do that, and it's within the first 5 years of the horizon. We're right there right now. But there is no reason at all that Broadway couldn't be made into a bike route, just like Washington to the west of Vine Street. To have a plan that ends right there, this is not connectivity, this is not a citywide part of a major plan. And so I would suggest that this is not a safety issue on Broadway. I agree safety should trump convenience. There's no question. But I think in terms of doing this particular action on the part of the council, you may in fact be creating a bigger safety problem than you have with the bikes as they exist right now. It's not very logical if there's no tie into another path. Creating a bike route would answer a lot of the questions that I can talk about briefly in terms of the memo you got from the staff that lists the options that you have in this case.
We have 1 minute, Mr. Pollack.
Pardon me?
1 minute.
Well, I would ask for some indulgence because I'm representing a lot of people here. If I could have
Another
slightly
5.
extra
Another
time.
5.
Another 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I've passed out something to you, and it is a petition that was taken around the neighborhood over the last couple weeks. There are, as you take a look at the cover page, which has some bullet points that I wrote down that kind of summarizes what I'm talking about tonight. There are 35 residences in this particular area on the map that you got. The map that you have that's marked in yellow shows the homes, either residents or owners, that have signed this petition. It is overwhelming majority of people who live in this area. And I really, I'm a bike advocate. I like the bike plan. I use the bike paths in the city, but it doesn't mean that it's perfect, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be amended and reviewed. And in this instance, I think we need to review it. There are the 28 residences who actually were contacted. There was one homeowner who said that they did not want a bike path, and one of the 4 people that live at the fourplex at 605 Broadway said they wanted a bike path. And we can add one tonight because the young lady who spoke first, who lives right around the corner, certainly has a stake in what happens in this particular corridor. 71 people representing 26 of those 28 properties are opposed to this. And I frankly don't want to be sitting where you guys are sitting in 6 months when somebody asks, in the event that somebody parks 3 or 4 blocks away, because there's really no alternative parking that's been identified. There's very little in that area. I don't want to be sitting here to listen to somebody who has been assaulted or mugged or something's happened to them, come home late at night, 10 o'clock, can't find a place to park, and I guarantee that will happen. If you look at Kinch, where you guys had, I think, a similar discussion, I drove that today, and in fact, on the side of the street where parking is allowed, there were 0 cars. You look at Broadway right now with parking on both sides, it's packed day and night. And you've got people there who don't have driveways. So I would ask you to take a look at this and seriously think about this outside of your general and my general agreement that bike paths are good, bike safety is important. There's no indication this will increase bike safety. There doesn't seem to be a problem right now. Your own staff looked at speed on Broadway in a study that they did, as they told me, and there is no speed problem identified on Broadway in terms of the cars that travel on that street. And there aren't that many. The traffic is very light. I think that, and the flavor I'm getting here is that this was maybe a slam dunk for people, that there really wasn't much question that citywide that this is the right thing to do, and if the folks in this area don't like it. I actually had a guy tell me, if you live in a city that's bike friendly and you want to improve and increase bike usage, and you live in a place where there's limited parking, well, you can get rid of your car, or you can move somewhere else. It's one of the individuals who supported the bike path, and I have to say I thought that was a little over the top. I hope you don't ignore the citizen input here. I think it's really important. These are the people who are affected by this, and it is overwhelmingly their opinion that this needs to be reviewed, that to do this right now would be a mistake. If you are so tied to a personal agenda, or you consider what happens citywide in your opinion to be more important than the opinions of the people who live here, then you may very well go ahead and pass this anyway. But I would ask you to think about it before you do that. This plan is not perfect. This is one element I think that we should take another look at, and we're starting a bike review right now. There's no reason that we can't put it on the agenda, reconsider it, and try and address some of the negatives that might happen that we haven't talked about here. If you feel that not passing this ordinance will somehow mean that you don't support bike safety, or that the plan's going to fall apart, or that we need to move ahead and everything that's in there needs to be done, I would suggest that's a little bit short-sighted. I was on the Plan Commission when this came through the Plan Commission. I have to admit, it was a lot of pages. I took a good look at the executive summary. I looked at the map, but I didn't actually really even check the street I live on in terms of this recommendation. I would suggest that's probably true of a number of people involved in this. So please heed the advice of your citizenship. Put a hold on this. Take a look at it. Consider the negatives, which are very clear to the people in this neighborhood, balanced with the positives, which are not that clear in terms of a bike safety problem in this area. And for those folks that sign this, what we encourage you to do is to not pass this ordinance removing that parking at this time. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the survey, the petition that we did, or anything else I found in going out and talking to people. The folks who don't want this, in fact, practically jumped out of their porches to sign the petition. People are very concerned about it. And what's nice is most people knew this was going on. A lot of the residents had received a letter. The homeowners certainly had. So people were aware. You know how hard it is to get people out to a meeting or to sign anything. So take a look at the number of people who went to the trouble to sign this, were willing to sign it, and take what they think is important for their neighborhood seriously. It would be a mistake to say we know more about what's right for this corridor than the people who live there. I would suggest we don't do that.
Thank you, Mr. Pollack. Charlie?
Yeah, hey, Mike, thanks. Thanks for doing all the work here, too.
Oh, it was
so during the summer, I've been, and the problem is I didn't do these counts in the past. I'm a regular through on Broadway, Oregon, California, and Washington are all streets, both directions that I use.
Me too.
So during the summer, the maximum number of cars I ever counted on Washington, day or night, having checked over a dozen times, different times, was 18. The median was 15. The mode was also 15. On the entire stretch of 4 blocks of Broadway.
Okay.
Okay, so, but that's during the summer, no universities, minimal university students, minimal, and no high school traffic. So once university is back in session, people are moved back in, do we have any counts of the number of spaces, of number of cars that actually park overnight on Broadway?
I can tell you from my own experience from living there that street, whether it's in school, out of school, university in, high school in or out, that street is packed with parking.
But not in the summer.
24 hours a day, the summer as well. Now
No, I've never seen more than 18 cars on that street in 4 blocks.
Well, I live right there, and I can tell you that has not been my experience.
I've gone there over a dozen times.
Especially on the west side. There are a number of residents that do not have off-street parking there. And as I said, if you've ridden on Broadway, you know very well there's very little car traffic, and as a bicyclist, my experience has been that there is no safety problem. I use it every day, and I do not have a problem with that.
I just don't see the crammed with cars, and I don't remember that from riding it at night after council meetings. It's the route that I take.
I'm not sure what to tell you, except that when I look at it daily, my experience is not the same. And I think if you remove half the parking from that stretch, you're going to wind up with a real problem.
Like I said, I've never seen more than 18 cars there this summer, even in the middle of the night, during the week.
Okay.
Oh, I do have another idea here. Okay, so there were some other alternatives that might come up. I'm not wedded to one idea or another. I've got my own criticisms of the plan. One of the things I'd like to see tried, and hopefully this will come up in the bike master plan, is some traffic, essentially traffic circles in some situations. They've been placed in some, if you want to do traffic calming, if we wanted to have, say, a better through path on Oregon going east-west, which is a major bicycle route, you could put rather than having the traffic east-west having to stop, if you put a mini roundabout essentially at Oregon and Broadway, you could essentially add some safety to the street by basically using the properties of a mini roundabout. I'm trying to channel Gary Zico here, but I'm not doing very well.
No, you're doing fine. And I can guarantee you that in exchange for not having to give up the parking in front of their homes for an awful lot of people, they would love to see an alternative like that. Now, a bike route would make a lot of sense. It doesn't tie into anything at Washington anyway.
It's already a bike route. We've made it a bike route simply because people use it as a bike route.
Put up some signage. There's Washington west of Vine Street needs signage. Share the road, bike route. I don't see any signs up there.
No, it needs sharrows, and I think those are planned for when it's repaved.
Good. Very good idea. There's no reason at all that wouldn't work on Broadway and provide whatever measure of future safety is necessary without the inconvenience and the safety problems of removing all that parking for those folks.
Eric.
So I have a couple of questions. I don't know, they may not be directed to Mike, but they're raised by things that Mike has said. One is that there is a neighborhood in West Urbana that has parking that's effectively restricted to residents.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm much more sympathetic with the needs of residents to park than I am of high school students to park there. So I don't know if this would really be a question for staff, but also for you, whether that would help to mitigate your concerns. There would be fewer total parking spaces, but
I think there was actually some discussion with one of the residents along Broadway about the possibility of doing that because this woman hates having high school students park there. They wake her up in the morning and they take up a lot of room.
Yeah.
My experience, although different from Mr. Smythe's, tell me that you're going to have a parking problem regardless of whether the high schoolers are there. I think that their ability to come in and park there during the days when school's in session will exacerbate that.
Yeah.
And will make it worse than it would have been otherwise. But I think if you asked folks, they're not going to want to pay $300 a year to park in front of their own house. And my experience with that entire Carl Park to Lincoln area where they put in those restrictions is that a lot of the purpose behind that was, in fact, to keep high school students off of those streets during the day. And I never really agreed with that. I thought that was kind of discriminatory. So is it a possibility? Yes. Would it solve what I think is going to arise as a problem if you pass this ordinance? I'm not convinced. I'm not sure.
The second question I have is can this be considered independently of the resurfacing of Broadway, which is going to happen next year? That is, that doesn't need a decision on this. I mean, it could always be restriped after that. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
Correct. Whatever, irrespective of what the decision is, the street will be resurfaced. Now, it's appropriate to do it at the striping at the same time. That's the best way to do it. But we have until next summer to make that ultimate decision.
If I might, it's my understanding as well that the resurfacing is a done deal, and I think that's great. Do it or not do it, it doesn't make a huge difference to me one way or the other. But the fact is, I just became aware tonight that the resurfacing project had been put off till spring or summer. I thought it was going to be done later this year, and I'm sure that there's other things going on that have caused that. That's even more reason not to pass this in 2 weeks. There is no reason to rush into this. We've got months to take a look at it, perhaps give the bike folks a chance to take a look at this and reconsider it. And I never really understood. I mean, they clear Broadway for parades and for street sweeping and for leaf pickup. I don't think it'd be that difficult to simply put up a couple of signs and stripe it later on if that would, in fact, help us make a better decision.
So I'll just put in another thought, and that is, I mean, there are two people here I respect who are disagreeing about the facts. And I think what that means is maybe we need to look more carefully, you know, as a city, at a more comprehensive survey at what the facts actually are on the parking.
I would add that if there was, in fact, a bike path proposed for Washington as well, and it was going to be done all at the same time along with Illinois, I might very well decide that on trade-offs that it might be worth it, even though the inconvenience that would be caused to the people in the neighborhood. But
Can you acquire the property for us?
Not for a dead end.
Can you acquire the property for us?
Are you kidding? I teach for a living.
Well, I'm assuming you can get it from the school district on that side of the street.
They don't listen to me, Mr. Smythe, I have to tell you.
Any further questions? Right. Carol?
I would recommend that we defer this item and I don't know, unless there's some pressing need, and I don't think it's been demonstrated as a pressing need to do this at this moment, to defer this item to a couple of months or so. Actually, I mean a couple of months on this issue, because we won't be restriping the street for some time. And so I don't see the rush on doing it at this point. So I move a deferment on it.
Dennis?
Please.
You do have to vote on the deferment. When the deferment is required, it's either voted up or down, but you do have to vote.
Well, it also has to be seconded, but we do have further public comment, so can we hold your motion until we let the rest of the public comment?
Well, it'll die unless somebody second it. So, no second, no.
Make it here in a few. Yeah.
Thank you all very much, and I also appreciate letting everybody on both sides of this tell you what they think about it.
Thank you. Jeff Yockey.
Thank you very much. Jeff Yockey, live at 304 West Washington, involved with Champaign County Bikes, and trying to bring a few perspectives here and modify mine from what things have already been said. The visual reference, the current Urbana Bicycle Master Plan is a hefty document. It was handed to me and said, bone up on this, you know, and there's a lot going on here, and I appreciate the work that's been done before. It's thoughtful, and just to Michael's comment, you know, as you're building out a system, some part of the bicycle network is going to be built first, and it's not going to connect anything. Then there's going to be another segment that may not be adjacent to it that we built out, and pretty soon you get to connect. And so Broadway fits into a bigger plan. I was in Champaign last week visiting with them about the completion of State Street, 4 blocks that let them complete from Bradley up north all the way down to Windsor in the south. And if you jog a little bit on Windsor, you can get all the way to the south part of Savoy. So continuity of the north-south conduit is there. Broadway is important for the north-south conduit that we've been talking about. It's also located very close to 2 key destinations, the urban middle school and high school, that complex there. That's a key destination. The U of I is a big destination. We've heard about that tonight, but the middle school and high school is a destination, and Lincoln Square Mall is another one. And so this connects those two. And if you're going from the south to one of those, or you come from the north down to the other one, Broadway is important there. I live on Washington Street. I'm sure most of the traffic on Washington doesn't belong to the people who live there. It's a public street. It's used for transit. It's used for services. It's there, and the decisions that have been made previous to this are what's in the best interest for everybody for Washington Street. I can't park in front of my house. Nobody on my side of the block can. But it all works, and so I think that is an important point. That, and I do feel it is a loss for people that have lived there a long time to give up parking spots. But Broadway is also there for the people that live north of Broadway and north of downtown Urbana as they head south. It's there for the people that live in the south to go to the north. And so I support the building out of bicycle lanes there. One thought, I think a lot of good thoughts are coming up tonight. I'll just add this one. Reducing speed limits to 20 miles an hour, 25, but I'd like 20 is a great number. I think it's great for everybody involved. If you were to restrict it to 20 miles an hour and travel the whole length of Broadway for those 4 blocks, the difference is only going to be in seconds from one end to the other. And I think that would increase the quality of life for everybody and would bring a lot of good. So the University District is at 25. We might want to consider something like that in Urbana, and I'll just kind of leave it there. I'm excited about the progress of a comprehensive network happening across Champaign, Urbana, and Savoy. Since we've been giving out these bike maps in the last 10 days, had lots of conversations, and many people have commented on the increased number of bicyclists they've seen in the last few years. And I'm sure $4 a gallon gasoline has helped on that, but I think also this network is helping on that. And year after year, there is a shift going on among the next generation coming in, that cars are not as important. People don't have to have their license the moment they turn 16. They're waiting to take driver's ed until they're 18. They're moving places where they don't have to have a car. And I'm seeing that in my kids' cohorts. And so I think it was beginning to reflect a new attitude. And
you have
this all fits
1 minute,
together.
Mr. Yockey.
Yes, thank you very much. I've got enough comment for enough time for one more comment, and that's just a comment on Carolyn's comment earlier about the well-being of everybody in Urbana. I'm here making some comments about bicycles, but I share that goal. We hope that our work on bicycles is contributing to that bigger thing. But I'm glad to be in Urbana. I want it to be a better place for everybody. So I appreciate your comments there earlier tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Linda Patterson.
Good evening. My name is Linda Patterson. I live at 2005 South Anderson, and I'm a longtime Urbana resident, a Broadway property owner, and mother of 3 children, 2 of whom are grown, one that's still college age. And I promise I'll be brief. It's my belief that the loss of approximately half of the on-street parking on South Broadway Avenue between Illinois and Washington will cause significant hardship and personal safety concerns for the residents there. The point I want to respectfully underscore for this council is that when the parking's removed, students who comprise a large portion of the Broadway Avenue residents might be forced to walk for several blocks in order to get from their cars to their homes. I think many of you know that college students keep really long hours and often return home late in the evening alone. And the prospect of a young person, or really anyone of any age, being required to walk long distances late at night and in bad weather is very troublesome from a personal safety standpoint. Given that Broadway is a very wide and low traffic street that already provides a safe path for bike traffic, I ask that parking not be reduced on Broadway so that we can ensure residents' personal safety. And thank you for hearing my concerns.
Thank you. And finally, Patrick Patterson.
Good evening. This has been a long night, and I appreciate your patience in listening to public input. I know that sometimes it must make for a long evening. My name is Patrick Patterson. I'm a longtime Urbana resident and a property owner on South Broadway Avenue. As a person who enjoys running and cycling for many years, I'm very supportive of our city being more and more bicycle friendly. Cycling is a great form of transportation and certainly a way we can stay fit and live longer. So I support that. I'd like to thank the city staff and everyone who contributed time to the bike plan. I think it's a great project and a certain worthy thing for the city of Urbana to do. It's easy to understand why this stretch of Broadway was selected to be part of the bike plan. It's wide, it's relatively low traffic street, and it's historically provided a safe place for bicyclists to ride because of those characteristics of the road, allowing them, of course, to avoid the busier streets of Race and Vine. I worked on a number of large projects in my career, and I think it's important to recognize that most good project plans end up needing some degree of, let's say, fine-tuning as they're brought into implementation. The bike plan for South Broadway, I believe, is such a case. There are a few important adjustments to the bike plan that are needed to promote bike safety, underscore, while at the same time preserving the parking and safety needs of South Broadway Avenue residents. Focusing on Broadway, the housing on Broadway, the housing on Broadway is older. Some homes are more than 100 years old, and they're represented by a combination of multifamily and single-family residents. So it's a rather densely populated street that have been there for years and years. If you look at some of the properties one by one, the amount of off-street parking at these properties is really rather minimal. In fact, some of the properties don't even have a driveway. The people who live on South Broadway Avenue have relied upon the city's historical commitment to provide parking on both sides of the street. The Broadway bike plan, which would ultimately eliminate almost half the on-street parking, will create a real and significant hardship for the residents. Anyone who lives on the street doing routine things like coming home from work, coming home from school, or coming home in their car with a few bags of groceries needs the ability to park reasonably close to their home. These residents also deserve the ability to have guests over and have a place for them to park. The next point I think is really important. If a resident is unable to park near their home, it is not only a matter of inconvenience, but it's a matter of personal safety. Most notably, if the parking restrictions result in residents being forced to walk from faraway parking places to their homes. And I'm not talking about walking across the street instead of parking on one side of the street as opposed to the other, as was suggested in some earlier input. I think that such conditions where somebody has to walk blocks and blocks to their home, especially late at night, could increase the incidence of muggings and personal injury. We believe the fundamental needs of the people who reside full-time on Broadway must be kept front and center in all of our minds. The needs of cyclists who use the stretch of Broadway periodically or for a few minutes each day are also very important. but must be
You have
met.
1 minute, Mr. Patterson.
Okay, I'll finish. But must be met in a way that preserves residents' quality of life and personal safety. If this is not the case, the bike plan will not be a success. The good news is that we can make an adjustment to the bike plan to make it a win-win by making it a bike route instead of bike lanes. If we can make this minor change, I believe we can avoid the public outcry that will erupt if the needed parking is removed, and will keep the focus on the positive aspects of improving bike usage and safety. I can speak for a lot of neighborhood residents who agree that reducing parking will be a horrible burden. The good news is that we really don't have to do that. We have the opportunity for a win-win if we go with the bike route approach. Thank you for hearing my comments. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Charlie?
Yeah, Mr. Patterson, wanted to get your reaction to a couple of the ideas that have come up tonight.
Sure.
Reduce speed, 20, 25 mile an hour along the road.
Yeah, I have no problem with that at all.
Okay. Well, yeah, 25 miles an hour would be a nice speed for the whole city in
Sure.
residential. Resident-only parking.
Well, I'm somebody who used to live in West Urbana. My wife and I live in Southeast Urbana now on Anderson Street. So I had an opportunity to experience the parking permit thing, and it wasn't fun. And I think that administering that with rental properties where tenants are there for a year and then gone, it could be rather complicated to do that.
Okay. And then the idea of a mini roundabout. I don't know if it's doable. I'm trying to find out now. A mini roundabout at Oregon and Broadway.
I'd have to think about that one. As I think about it, we might be able to achieve a lot of good with simply having a four-way stop.
Oh, no, it kills momentum. That's what I'm trying to do, is keep momentum for bicyclists going both directions. And a roundabout does that.
Okay, I have to say, Mr. Smythe, I'm not really well informed on roundabouts, and so if that could be done and maintain the parking for the residents of South Broadway, I think that would be worthy of study.
Yeah, calling Gary Zico. Where is he when you need him? He's moved to L.A. I can give you some stuff. I'll send you some stuff on
Sure.
roundabouts.
Any other questions?
Eric?
So we've heard a lot about how wide Broadway is, and this is perhaps a stupid question, but is it so wide that there could be parking on both sides of the street and also striping, or is it just a little too narrow for that?
Any further questions? All right, I do have two more. Barry Israelowitz.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name's Barry Israelowitz. Here to support the plan to add bicycle lanes to Broadway Avenue. I live on the section of Broadway Avenue in question at 605 South Broadway. I think Mike mentioned me by address earlier. I commute by bike every day to my work at the university. I also volunteer at a do-it-yourself bike co-op in my spare time. Now we've heard a lot about the benefits of bicycling. They're well accepted: improved health, improved personal budget, reduced traffic, improvements to environment and community, so much more. I wanted to concentrate a bit on bike route versus bike lane. If we want to have more people cycling, and I think that's pretty well agreed, we need to reduce obstacles to bicycling. That's really what the work I do volunteering at the Bike Project is all about, at the Bike Co-op is all about. Finding all the reasons that people either are afraid to bicycle or have problems with it or find some difficulty there. And people who work in the field have found that there are some bicyclists who are comfortable biking just anywhere. That's me. I'll bicycle just about anywhere and try to do it as safely as possible. But there's also a lot of them who won't. People who won't get into bicycling, who can't bike commute, and are afraid of doing that. Bike lanes will increase the number of people bicycling. They provide an inviting place for people to bicycle. And this is very important for people who aren't yet lifetime cyclists. They can transition into bicycling that way. Users of bike lanes understand that they help cars and bikes share the road. They help keep actions predictable, and that means safe. And having a network of connected bike lanes, as is in the bicycle plan, that really increases the number of people bicycling. The bike plan is great. It doesn't happen at all the same time, so I can see where, since we're in the middle of it, that people are seeing perhaps not perfect logic to everywhere a bike lane is, but that will work out. Broadway is by far the best candidate in the area for north-south bike lanes. It's considering location, street width, location preferences expressed in all the public workshops and all the careful planning and all the years leading up to the master bicycle plan. Having these connected bicycle lanes is vital to making a bike network actually work for transportation. I'll take a moment on the data collection that I'm a little surprised I haven't seen. It's possible that some of these concerns can be allayed. It would be great to have this data on counts of residential parking needs versus off-street parking and the potential for reserved spaces for residents. It can probably be compiled pretty quickly. We don't have that many residents along this stretch of Broadway, but that could move the conversation very, very quickly. And I'd hope the council can look into getting that done pretty soon. It doesn't sound like a great deal of work to call up the number of residents and ask them about their parking needs and then count number of off-street spaces. That might settle it pretty quickly. As to sum up, of course we think sometimes of the space in front of our house or apartment as our own personal parking space. It's not. It's a public street. So please go ahead with a plan which will benefit not just myself and fellow residents of Broadway Avenue, but really thousands of people in the city. Any questions on that? Let me know.
Bill?
Yeah, I appreciate the opinion that bicycle lanes will get more people bicycling, and I think that's good to get more people bicycling, but we can't obviously have bicycle lanes on every street. And so people that are bicycling from, say, the King Park area to high school are going to come down probably Goodwin to Illinois. It's a great street. There's bicycle lanes all the way to Lincoln Avenue, and then there's nothing planned until you get to Race Street. So I think in order for those people to get to bicycle lanes, they're going to have to pass areas that don't have bicycle lanes. And I think the way to get those people bicycling more, or anyone bicycling more, is not to put lanes on every street, but to increase confidence of the bicycler. In order to do that, they have to be confident to ride on any street. Hopefully we can accommodate as much as we can with bicycle routes, sharrows, well-marked streets. But I would disagree that bicycle lanes by themselves are the way to do that. And in case we get this deferred, I want to also get out there before, because we won't be able to debate that. I have one other opinion about bicycle lanes, is that they aren't safer. And the example there is if you're riding along a parked cars, you're supposed to ride 5 feet away from parked cars. This plan has a 5-foot bicycle lane, which means you would be right on the edge of the bicycle lane. So any car passing you that's supposed to keep 3 feet away from you won't do it because they see the white line and they say, I can go up to that white line. So they're going to pass you within 1 or 2 foot of that bicycle lane. So I don't think we should give people a false sense of security by putting a bicycle lane in this really heavily traveled area. I think the way to do it is to increase the signage, increase the markings on the road, make it real obvious it's a bike route with all kinds of sharrows. There's even things called bike boulevards we could do where we could paint the street green and put sharrows on it.
That I can go along with.
One big boulevard between the high school and the mall would be great, but I would not support the bike lane. I wanted to get that out there in case we can't debate it.
Can we respond? Yeah. Or would you like to respond?
As somebody who, as Diane mentioned before, and probably you too, Barry, bicycles up and down Goodwin Avenue, but has done so for many years before there were bike lanes. Boy, the bike lanes have made that street so much safer. That striping has, and I I saw personally, I don't know how many accidents there were prior to the striping, but I saw one myself, and I'm a believer in striping bike lanes.
Okay, any more questions of the speaker?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Could I at least respond to a
Well,
a
no
couple of
question was
lines?
asked, so I don't think so. Are there any questions of the speaker?
Really? Okay. Sorry.
All right,
Brown.
thank you.
Okay.
And finally, Cynthia Hoyle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to talk tonight. I know the hour is late. I have a presentation that I brought along. I'm also providing copies of it to you there to make it a little bit easier for you to see what I am talking about. And while I'm pulling this up, I would like to say that, first of all, Carol, I also see occasional potholes, and I would like to say this weekend I sent an email about 2 potholes, one on my street, and my husband was astonished this morning to see the staff patching the pothole on our street before 8:30 a.m. So Public Works will respond quickly, but we have to let them know, and I specifically designated these 2 because I said they were pedestrian and bicycle safety issues. So I've provided you with a copy of a handout that comes from the Federal Highway Administration. It's one of the proven safety countermeasures, bike lanes and road diets. Road diets done with bike lanes, and I wanted to provide that to you so that you could see this is one of the 7 countermeasures that the Federal Highway Administration has identified as a proven way to improve safety on roadways. The first slide that I had here, we've heard a lot of discussion about tonight, so I'm not going to spend any more time on that. But I did want to emphasize this, and as a transportation planner with 30 years of experience, I can tell you that changing the speed limit on a roadway does not have much impact on speed. Changing the design of the roadway has a huge impact on speed, and narrowing the travel lanes has a big impact on speed. This is why the Federal Highway Administration has recommended this, because there are many, many studies and a lot of data showing that this improves safety. So you can see here what happens when people are hit by vehicles going at different speeds, which is why we have the speed zones around schools at 20 miles an hour, because you have a 9 out of 10 chance of surviving when hit by a vehicle going 20 miles an hour. And the data for pedestrians pretty much applies to bicyclists, because you do not have any gear on you to protect you on a bicycle except for your helmet, just like pedestrians do. At 30 miles an hour, only half will survive, and at 40, only 1 out of 10. So speed matters a lot. And so this is what I just told you about the handout. The Federal Highway Administration is recommending to states actively, to DOTs, that they employ these countermeasures, and that reducing car travel lanes and replacing with things like bike lanes and center turn lanes has a big impact on safety on roadways. This has been proven over and over again in other communities. This is a community I visited in Washington, Bridgeport Way, University Place. They installed the bike lanes to reduce conflicts. They saw a 60% reduction in crashes. We don't have crash data on this street, but it's nevertheless a proven countermeasure, which I wanted to show you. These are additional studies that have happened that have shown other places how the crashes have been reduced. And this last bullet point, that a comparison of crash rates of all types in major cities has shown that cities with higher bicycle use have lower traffic crash rates. And I would like to say, too, that cities that have bicycle infrastructure have significantly higher rates of bicycling, and that includes having bike lanes. Bike routes and sharrows have not been shown to increase rates of bicycling. This is also another piece of data I wanted to provide to you, the Relative Danger Index, and you will see here that streets with bike lanes are significantly safer than streets without bike lanes, and that riding on sidewalks is one of the least safe ways, and that is what many people do when they don't have bike lanes because they do not feel safe sharing the road. I have numerous friends. I'm a bicycle instructor who I offer to teach them bicycle in traffic, and they tell me, I will not bicycle in traffic. I will not bicycle with cars. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you tell me. I am not going to bicycle with cars. They want separated infrastructure. And so providing education will only give us a small bump in increase in bicycling. The additional information here is that bicycle lanes improve behavior, and I specifically wanted to point out that on streets with bike lanes, bicyclists were much more likely to stop at stop signs. As you know, this has been an issue in our community and something that we continue to work on. They're less likely to ride on the sidewalks, and they're less likely to ride the wrong way. Although I will say I have seen bicyclists riding the wrong way towards me in bike lanes, something which I am always unhappy and say something to them about. Bike lanes have positive health impacts. We partner with CU Safe Routes to School project with the Public Health District, and it's very important that we encourage our children to get to school by active transportation modes. I wanted to provide you with this information and the fact that in this study they found that most of the bicycling occurs on neighborhood streets where children live and go to school. The conclusion of the study was that bike lanes can have a positive impact on creating a healthy physical environment. And I also wanted to share this with you. The fact was provided earlier that 50% of children in the U.S. walked or biked to school in 1969 within 1 mile. And today, that was 87% of the kids within 1 mile. And today we have 15% or less, and much of that's due to not having the infrastructure that provides parents with the feeling that their children can get to and from school safely. I'm a parent. My children went to the Urbana schools. We chose to live in Urbana because we wanted our children to be able to go back and forth to school without being driven. That's what they did. They went through the schools here. They biked, they walked, they took transit. And my daughter still lives here and goes to the university. She does not own a car. She uses a bicycle. She comes and goes all times of the day and night. She does not have a car, and she is able to do that safely, both late at night and during the daytime. So I also looked at specifically about Safe Routes to School and in their national guide, and they were very specific in saying that bicycling is very important in helping students who live too far away from school to be able to feel safe getting there. As Carol said, this is important to having active transportation options for our students. I wanted to share this graph with you too, that as communities have installed bicycle infrastructure and the number of bicyclists has increased, the number of crashes goes down. The only way that you get people to increase bicycling is by providing the infrastructure. There is no city in the country that has had the kinds of rates of increase in bicycling that Portland and other cities have had that has not also installed a lot of bicycle infrastructure. Providing education is helpful, and I do this all the time. I do this with Safe Routes to School, as you know. It's a primary part of what I do, but by itself, educating people does not get them to bicycle more often. I also wanted to let you know that part of what we've been doing with the middle school students is helping encourage them to walk and bike to school. This bicycle infrastructure is a key part of that program, and that we are providing them incentives for doing that. We're going to be doing a Splash After School education program this year with them and doing that for a number of weeks at the middle school. We know from the data in the email I sent you today that the rates of physical activity decreases significantly as our children move into middle and high school. Yes, we still have the attitude that biking to school is not cool among certain sets of kids, and so that's one of the things that we want to try and change. We want bicycling to be cool, and it certainly is cool on campus now. So that was the information that I had to share with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Madam Mayor.
Okay, is there any difference between putting a bike path on a busy street like Goodwin, which has a pretty, not only a lot of traffic, but higher speeds than a street like Broadway? You're talking about the impact, but they're different kinds of streets, and I wondered if there's any evidence that there'd be a difference depending on the type of street that you're installing it in.
Well, on Goodwin, I would suggest that you did have a lot of crashes there, and installing the bike lanes may well have reduced the number of crashes. On Broadway, we haven't had crashes, but what we're trying to do there is facilitate the network. The bike lanes there would connect to bike lanes that are planned on Illinois and connect to the bike lanes on Washington. We do not have enough width between Vine and Broadway to put the bike lanes in, but we do have a bike route there, and I'm hoping that we have sharrows and signage that show people you can go 2 blocks and get back to another bike lane. So I think that the network is what we were looking at with Broadway, and the fact that this connects to the major destinations that people requested bicycle infrastructure for, the high school and Lincoln Square. So part of this was also based on what the public told us that they were looking for. So in terms of the impact on Broadway would be different than the impact on Goodwin. Goodwin has higher traffic volumes of all kinds than Broadway, but in terms of the connectivity and the impact on providing people with a system in the community and providing for more safety for the students, Broadway's bike lanes provide that benefit. Does
So you
that
think
answer
there'd
your
be-
question?
Well, you think there'd be more people, there'd be a differential between the effect in the 2 streets, but you're saying the advantage of putting bike lanes in Broadway is that there would be more people using bicycles on Broadway. So
And-
that may be what the issue is. Would that really increase the number of people?
And that would be part of it, and I think it would also help define the space for bicyclists, as some of the people who talked tonight said. Having that defined space invites them to bicycle there and makes them feel safer. And the fact is that all of the research shows that bike lanes do increase safety. There are no studies that show that installing bike lanes resulted in more bicycle crashes or
Right, but
during crashes.
It might be different increase in safety on Broadway than it would be on Goodwin.
Well, that's correct. We clearly don't have any crash data on Broadway, but we put bike lanes on a number of streets where we have not had crashes, but we've wanted to provide connectivity specifically for students in particular.
Okay, thank you.
Charlie? Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlie?
Well, that's a bit of a disclaimer. Everybody knows I'd probably do 1,000 miles a month on a bike. Bill and I actually do road biking together. So, and our views are going to differ a little bit here, which will be interesting juxtaposition, I think. But my views on bike lanes have been evolving. Bike infrastructure does seem to encourage bicycling among non-bicyclists and those afraid of commuting. There is a gender gap, and bike lanes help with that. I know that my own spouse is a major bicyclist, and is very picky about the bike lanes she uses. If it's a good bike lane, she'll use it. If it's a bad bike lane, she will ride outside of it. And so that's something I want to try to explain as we talk about it. For a committed bicyclist, a poorly designed bike lane or infrastructure is a hindrance. So we need to be very careful when we install bike infrastructure. Another factor has come up tonight is the speed, the average daily traffic, and things like that. If we had 20, 25 miles an hour on all streets and no cell phone type distractions, we probably wouldn't need bike lanes anywhere. Cars and bikes could probably coexist as they did in Copenhagen in 1939 with no infrastructure at all. East Washington Street, which Craig Schronkweiler was the designer of, I think, is great because it has right buffered lanes on a fairly heavily used street. This is sort of now the gold standard for our communities. The right buffering makes you more visible to cars coming up behind you, but more importantly, it makes you more visible to cars backing out of driveways or at intersections because you're a little further out, you're in their cone of vision. And that there's a discussion of that in the back of the bike map. Next to cars, you need 4 feet for your body from the car, 5 feet from the front wheel. And so if a car's parked, 7 feet are taken up. You need another 4 feet for the door zone. That's 11 feet. And then ideally, you have another 4 feet for the bike lane itself because of what
what other people talk about, the cars coming by you on the left. You know, you need some operating room. You can jiggle that, and you can come up with some minimums. So part of it's depending on the speed of the speed of the street and things like that. You know, ideally, that's what you want. You want 7 feet for parking, 4 feet for the door zone, and another 4 feet for your operating bike lane. Right now, what we do when we can't get all that space is we add tick marks to indicate the door zone, sort of pushing people out in the bike lane. So if you have, like on Goodwin Avenue, you have 8-foot parking, 6-foot bike lane. Well, you have to ride basically in that outer 2 feet of the bike lane towards the cars to stay out of that door zone. And so that's what people do if you want to stay out of the door zone. Vehicles, my experience in vehicles is that they tend to go around you most of the time, but not all of the time. They give you the 3 feet that's required by law, but it doesn't always happen. I get buzzed, you know, probably once a day by a car that comes too close or cuts in too fast on me, with or without the bike lanes. I urge everybody to understand what right hook and left cross type car accidents are. Those are the two biggest things that you worry about as a bicyclist. You ride defensively. You worry about that car that comes out of an intersection that doesn't see you out of a driveway. That's the, but you worry more about the car that overtakes you and right hooks you. It turns in front of you and you crash into it because it's cut you off. And that's a problem with some of our bike lanes because vehicles don't realize they're supposed to pull over into the bike lane to turn right, not try to get around you. They should pull in behind you. Right now, I'm comfortable with a 6-foot bike lane next to 8-foot parking. I think that works. On the non-parking side, though, this is where things get a little tricky. I think 6 feet is the minimum you need to keep you at least somewhat visible. If you ride on the outside of that 6 feet, you know, right towards the inside. If you ride close to the 6-foot line inside the bike lane, you're trading a little bit of visibility. You know, you don't have as good a visibility as, say, you have on East Washington, but you have more visibility than if you're riding in the gutter. We don't want people riding in the gutter because you can't be seen. You're not seen by the cars coming up from behind because their cone of vision is looking straight down the road. Okay, you're not seen by cars coming out of driveways or intersections because they're looking for the cars in the roadway, not your bicycle in the gutter. You're also more visible the further you out to cars that are coming towards you, and that's the left cross, cars that turn in front of you, cutting you off. The issue with Broadway, as I see it, is that there isn't space for a 6-foot bike lane on the non-parking side. And that's where I have a problem because, you know, hearing that the street's going to be resurfaced is really important because that means that the 2 or 3 or 4 feet that are close to the gutter right now are in terrible shape. You can't ride 4 feet from the curb right now. You have to ride 6 or 7 feet out, especially between Oregon and Illinois Street, which is a major route that I take. You know, coming here tonight, I rode that, and I tried riding close to the gutter where the bike lane would be, and it doesn't work. I'm almost done. But the problem is we're trying to build connectivity. Broadway provides that connectivity from side streets like California and Oregon to both Lincoln Square and the high school and middle school. Students in the middle school need to cross Vine at Fairlawn or come from the north or south on Broadway. This also applies to high school as bike parking is located between the two buildings. Iowa and Michigan provide additional access by bike, and to me, I think we should immediately add Sharrows to Washington between Race and Vine, regardless of the quality of the pavement, because we're going to be putting Sharrows on South Race Street from Washington down to Pennsylvania. Now, is this an ideal design? Not quite. You know, the 6-foot on one bike lane on one side and only 5 foot on the other. It's not very good. I've got to think about it. But building infrastructure here clearly trades a big plus for encouragement without compromising safety too much. And when you have infrastructure like this connecting quiet residential streets or other bike infrastructure, you end up with a system that makes you want to get out and try bike commuting. It encourages you to ride. If our ultimate goal is a walkable, bikeable community, we need to build connectivity. Now, I would like to get more information on parking in this neighborhood, and it's good to know that we can take some time now before making a final decision. So I'd welcome a delay to get that information before taking a final vote up or down on this design. Thank you.
Okay, the hour is 10:48. Diane.
I'll say the most important thing first, and that is I would support a bike route on this stretch, but not a bike lane. I think it needs to make sense in terms of the overall network. And looking at the bicycle master plan, if I were a resident who lives down by the old Windsor Swim Club, there's actually a stretch of street that's marked as a street that doesn't exist. So Anderson Street doesn't go all the way through to Windsor. But anyway, if I were to take a route trying to get to Lincoln Square from my neighborhood, I would go on a bike route. I would go on Anderson Street. I'd be bike route, bike share, bike route up to Washington. There'd be a few blocks of striped lanes. Then I would go back to a bike route, and then I would get to Broadway, and all of a sudden I'd have lanes that would take me into Lincoln Square. The point I'm making is we have a mixture of markings in this network, and I think the infrastructure that we advocate for need to make sense. And in this case, given the low volume of cars on the street and the high volume of multifamily residences and the presence of the high school, and whether we like it or not, those kids do still bring cars to the high school, and if they don't park on Broadway, they're going to park on Walnut, and they're going to be spilling over onto those other really narrow streets in the neighborhood. And one of the prices you pay for keeping a high school and middle school together in the center of town is you have to accommodate the vehicles and the bicycles and the people that come with it. So in the context of where this street is and who's living on it and the desire of the residents and the overall network, which some streets, these lanes are just absolutely necessary, and others, I think this plan needs to be tweaked, and this is one of those spots.
Dennis.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the comments that I've heard from the residents who live on Broadway, and we've seen a petition of practically every single person who lives on the block that they have concerns about the removal of parking. They didn't come up with a decision about what their preferred markings on the street were, and actually this ordinance doesn't apply to that at all either. Really, this ordinance is a traffic commission item, and it's just about removal of parking on one side of a street. So at this point, I'm not interested in putting the bike lane on it. I think that a shared route is suitable. This is one of the widest streets in the city. It's 39 feet wide. We are currently allowing streets to be built in subdivision areas that are only 21 feet wide, and they're considered to be adequate. I walk on the street rather a lot of times. It's in my ward. I've gone up and down it, talking to residents, leaving leaflets. I think that in this instance, because I know that there's a lot of people who live on the street in multiple family housing, there's apartments, there's a lot of the houses on the block that are, duplexes or more. There's a lot of need for parking. I think it's been expressed. So at this time, I don't think I'm interested in changing the parking as it exists, and I think that a bike route will be sufficient.
Any other comments? Then Chair would entertain a motion. Charlie?
I'd like to make a motion directing staff to get an accurate parking count when students of both the university and high school types are around.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved.
I just have a question, though, because the actual item before us is not that. So maybe that can be an instruction afterwards, but we got to vote on what's actually before us or defer the item that's before us.
Charlie?
If I could explain this, basically we would basically keep this in the implication of this is that we would keep this item in committee, and maybe that would be a better motion. Move to keep this in committee and get a parking study from staff on both types of students.
Seconder concurs.
All right, it's been moved by Charlie and seconded by Eric that this ordinance be held in committee pending further review and information from staff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the ordinance will remain in committee. Given the late hour, the chair would entertain a motion to take in omnibus fashion all agenda items in agenda item number 10 with leave of the body. Madam Mayor.
I talked to Libby. I think you could do it in 2 motions.
Okay.
How do we do it?
A, B, and C, and D, E, and F could be done by omnibus.
A, B, and C in one.
And then D, E, and F, which is on the next
Is there an
page.
E?
Yeah, on the next page.
It says, well, maybe I have an old agenda.
Yeah, the new agenda just has D and F.
No.
It's D, E, and F.
Okay.
Trust me, there's
Where's an
an
E?
E in there.
All right.
Okay.
I'm doing A, B, and C
Okay.
together.
Fine.
A, B, and C all together for my.
All right.
Mr.
So the chair would, Carol?
I'd like to move resolution number 2013-08-041R, resolution number 2013-08-042R, and resolution 2013-08-043R in an omnibus fashion.
Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
enthusiastically second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Is
Mr.
there
Chair?
a similar motion on the next 3?
Absolutely.
Diane?
I'll move resolution number 2013-08-038R,
Can't.
resolution number 2013-08-039R, and 2013-08-04R.
Council?
Your first motion moved for the authority to approve
But we didn't
the A, B, and C in omnibus fashion. It passed. Now you have to pass all 3, and you
right.
haven't done that yet.
So we moved to pass in omnibus fashion, so now an actual motion on the 3 ordinances with 1 roll call. All
Okay.
those in favor?
Let me make a motion.
Just
Okay.
the council.
I'm sorry.
I
Is
make a
there a
motion that we send those 3 items, resolutions, to council with
been-
recommendation of approval.
All right, moved by Dennis,
Second.
second by Carol. All those in favor of moving resolutions in A, B, and C of agenda item 10 to the council, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Is there a motion to move in omnibus fashion the next 3? Moved by Charlie, seconded by Diane. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Same sign. The ayes have it.
So I make a resolution then that we, yes, that we move resolution 2013-08-038R, 039R, and 040R to council with recommendation of approval.
Motion by Dennis. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Bill. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the resolutions will be reported. So reported. All right, agenda item number 10, a motion providing direction that upon it being granted an easement from Alan Strong on 115 and 119 North Ray Street, the city will release its demolition lien on the 2 parcels. Is there any discussion?
Yeah.
Tom?
Do we need to extend our meeting for 10 minutes or so?
We're almost
No.
done.
All right. I have a quick question for Tom, and I know Alan has been waiting patiently for this all evening. It's my understanding that the Lincecum family or the trust or whatever is still on the hook to pay back the city, irregardless of what we do here. Is that correct?
The city's lien is currently on 5 parcels. If we release the lien on 2 of those, the full lien would still remain on the 3 parcels.
Okay.
That said, the Lincecum family truly does not have the resources to pay the city back, and so it's questionable. While we still will have a lien and we still will have control over any future transaction, it's unlikely that the city will recoup its investment in the end.
That's not the kind of news I wanted
Why?
to hear.
Eric?
Well, at least it's better to be owed money by someone who's bankrupt than to be bankrupt.
Charlie?
I move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
Moved by Charlie, seconded by Dennis. All those in favor say aye.
Just one comment, just the 10-second comment. Because I have so very little understanding of this, I'm going to vote no just for this point so that I can find out the whys and the hows of this.
Bill?
Yeah, I think I had most of my questions answered earlier by Tom, but I think just for clarification, we're approving this in principle. I assume that when we actually release the lien, we'd have a more detailed document or not?
The legal authority to release a lien technically rests with the city attorney. And so we are coming to you for direction, but the actual physical release of lien will be conducted by the city attorney or his designee within the legal division.
Diane?
This is one of those awfully painful decisions where I understand we have very few options, but I do think it's important for transparency's sake that the actual cost to the city for the dealing with this property is not $204,000, but it's closer to $350,000 if you include the real estate option to purchase the site, the phase 1 and 2 environmental studies and assessments, and the attorney's legal fees that have been paid. So this is a horrible, well, it's a difficult situation for the city, but we don't have any choice in this matter. But the actual costs on this property are closer to $350,000.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, and agenda item number 10 will be reported to council. There being no further business to come before the committee of the whole, this meeting is adjourned.